March 1st, Wednesday, March 1st, and we're here at 7 p.m. for a special meeting. I would like to call this meeting to order. We will now stand for our Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please, Mr. Hitchline.
Mayor Milan.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Anderson.
Here.
Councilmember Sampson.
Here.
Councilmember Shepherd.
Here.
Councilmember Tinlin.
Here.
That's a quorum, Mayor.
Thank you. I do not see on our agenda an approval, motion to approve the agenda. Do we not need that for a special city council meeting?
They're called for a purpose.
It was called for a purpose.
So we can make an motion to amend the agenda as
Special meeting?
set. Special meeting. I motion that agenda items 6 and 7 be removed from the agenda. If time permits, be added back to this meeting agenda for city council discussion.
Support.
Discussion?
I'll go with that. I don't want to spend all night on 14 things.
Let's focus on the main thing, and if we can add, I agree.
Okay, roll call, please.
Councilmember Anderson.
Yes.
Mayor Milan.
Yes.
Councilmember Sampson.
Yes.
Councilmember Shepherd.
Yes.
Councilmember Tinlin.
Yes.
Thank you. We've just amended our agenda to remove items 6 and 7, which would be discussion of fiscal year 23-24 goals and also discussion to identify dates for fiscal year 23-24 budget workshops. The reason we did that is because when we set our meeting, we asked that it just have one item on it, and then if we had time, we would address the other items. So that's why we've adjusted that today. So now we'll move on to public comment. If anyone in the public would like to speak, you are welcome.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the council. My name is Matt Binkowski. I live at 561 Lerner Avenue. The Clawson City Charter requires that meetings of this council be held in accordance with Robert's Rules of Order and Michigan's Open Meetings Act. These two together provide a fair and orderly process, which allows for majority rule with minority concerns being heard, while keeping the public fully informed. In my watching this council over the past several months, I can tell you that these rules are routinely ignored. Brought a copy of the book in case any of you need to go out and buy one. One case in point is the actions that occurred at the January 17th council meeting. The agenda for that meeting was clear. There was to be a discussion of how to fill the vacancy on city council. The city clerk even handed out a document detailing some options of how to proceed with filling the vacancy. This council ignored all of those options. Instead, the council simply appointed Mr. Tinlin to the job. The council did this without giving public notice, as is required by the Open Meetings Act and Robert's Rules of Order. That's why I filed an ethics board complaint against Mayor Milan. It was her job as the presiding official to make sure that this council adheres to the rules. It is not the job of the city manager or the city attorney to make sure that she performs this duty. But after I filed that complaint is where this story gets interesting. First, the complaint was sent to Mayor Milan by the city attorney on February 9th. Soon thereafter, the mayor sent a copy of the complaint to her private Comcast email address. She then informed 2 of the 4 members of council, Bruce Tinlin and Bruce Anderson and Scott Tinlin. A few days later, Sue Moffett, a former council member and ally of the mayor, suddenly and mysteriously applied to fill a vacancy on the ethics board. Laurent Nusage had previously requested reappointment to the board, but for some unknown reason, his term was allowed to expire. Next, on February 16th, the city manager forwarded a legal opinion prepared by Crofton Legal to the mayor and members of the council. The opinion stated that it would be a conflict of interest for the mayor to vote for a vacant spot on the Ethics Board, and the mayor should recuse herself. But at the February 21st meeting, the agenda included a nomination to reappoint Laurent Nusage to the Ethics Board. But instead of recusing herself and not getting involved with the membership of the Ethics Board, Mayor Milan demanded to know why other candidates weren't on the agenda. You see, the mayor was determined to get involved in the membership of the Ethics Board, even after being told it was a conflict of interest to become involved. To me, it appears she is trying to stack the court with friendly jurors. As such, I respectfully ask that Mayor Milan immediately cease any involvement whatsoever in the process or membership of the Ethics Board until my complaint is resolved. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Binkowski. What a lot of information you just provided. We will move on to discussion of City Council appointed personal performance evaluation tool. So we have had a lot of items to look at. I think, Mr. Tenlin, you wanted to come prepared with something you would like to present, and then we will allow everyone an opportunity to present whatever they would like, and we will come up with a tool.
I had a framework for the discussion, so at least from the discussions I had, really what we want to have the outputs of this meeting is a revision and enhancement of the current processes and tools to allow City Council to consistently perform an effective direct review report. And topics we've talked about is the frequency, the ranking tool, the adding a matrix reporting input for applicable positions in the process, and really discussing the other review of the other positions and specific needs that have to be changed in that ranking tool. I have gone through the document, and maybe depending on what the outputs of the other council members should be, of walking through that document tonight and looking at recommendations. So that's my starting comment. So I also will yield to the other councilmen and what they want to see from the outputs of this special meeting. Because definitely we haven't met their criteria as listed in the document since it's been generated. So my goal is to get that into a functional process for all our employees that we need to use it on.
Yes, Councilman?
I was a big part in writing this. And I'm not attached to it because anything that we do can always be better. So it's been 2 years, and we found some problems with it, or some things that make it hard, give heartburn to council people. So please tell us every place that you think we could change, and we'll talk about it. So.
Councilman, Mayor Pro Tem Anderson, entitled. Do you have any comments you'd like to
Not
share?
at this point. I've looked at the old form. I've looked at the presentation that Councilman Tinlin provided. I'm pretty open to a lot of ideas here. I know I think I'd mentioned to some of the council persons before the meeting, I've worked for the same corporation for 30-some years. I've been evaluated probably 6 or 7 times. Actually, I've been evaluated 30-some times, probably under 6 or 7 different forms. So they're always trying to improve them. As an engineer, all us fellow engineers usually grumble about the fact the form's always changing and you've got to redo it. And of course, when measuring things with metrics, you almost like the pattern to remain constant. But again, I'm open to modifying the existing format. I guess one question I did have, though, the format, the older one, appears to be somewhat generic in terms of its, correct me if I'm wrong, some of them might not apply. But, yeah, I just wonder, perhaps it's too generic. Should we modify it for each of the different job positions? I'm open to discussion on that.
Councilmember Shepherd?
I would echo Mayor Pro Tem Anderson's sentiment regarding the fine tuning to each specific position that we would need to have a review for. One of the other things that I would like to tighten up the criteria. I think currently we have 0 to 6. I think we can simplify that a little bit, maybe 1 through 5 category. But again, that's just a 30,000-foot level idea. But whatever we come up with, I think it should be clear, it should be rational, it should be specific, and it should be something that we can all agree behind.
Okay, my thoughts are, I would like to see a component that allows for other city employees to offer feedback. I'm assuming that will always come back good, but my goal in any employee evaluation is that it's not just an opportunity to try and throw darts and figure out where there are holes, but to figure out ways people are doing things really well, and then focus on goals for the future, but also to see how the organization kind of works together. And I think when you throw other people's viewpoints in there, you kind of get a better picture of that. So I would like us to do that. I would also like an opportunity for whomever's being evaluated, whether it's the city manager, city clerk, whomever, that they also have an opportunity to share any kind of kudos they've received from the public, or things that we might not be aware of. Sometimes we get notice that so-and-so did something really great and they're really happy with it, and that's great, but we might not be privy to all of that. And I would like that to be part of the process as well. Just kind of building a little dossier of, things that you would like to share. I think one of my most important aspects that I would like covered would be communication, because I think from communication, fills success and failure, right? And we can always figure out different ways to perhaps bridge our communication to work, because our communication skills don't always work in the same capacity with the same users and people and such. So those are my primary things I would like really thrown into this tool. And those are my concerns.
I have a question for the mayor. So you're looking for a 360 all around, with all the people, or just handpicked, or?
I'm not even, I think we could send out, I have a very simplistic little tool we could send to, or have city manager blast to all of his people, right? And it can go to everyone, actually. It's not a bad thing to go to everyone. Or you could keep it to key management if you prefer to do that. But I don't think limiting it is really wise. I think there are good things all the way through. So I would like just a very brief, maybe 1 through 7 question type thing about how someone feels the city manager is doing. Do they feel like their department is recognized? Do they feel like their needs and goals are being recognized? Do they feel part of the team? And then what have they seen that have been huge successes? And then also what do they feel is missing, right? So just opportunities for improvement, which allow for a bigger picture all the way around, because we talk to key management on a regular basis, but we don't talk to everybody. And sometimes there is a little bit of a disconnect in there. So I would say that would be a once a year thing. I wouldn't do that. I know you've talked about differing ways and different.
In the middle, or would you do it at the end?
At the middle or the end of
Midterm evaluation, or to do it at the end evaluation?
I would think it would be the cumulative evaluation, the one major evaluation, because I would like to see one major evaluation. And then if you guys are really fixed on having more than one evaluation, I would like it to not be called an evaluation. I would like it to be, we use something called CAD conversations at my employment. That is just an opportunity quarterly to check in with people, and you don't always have to even sit and have those conversations. You can actually just forward information back and forth. I feel like we have bi-weekly meetings with our city manager because he's here, which gives us a pretty good opportunity for communication, but it doesn't necessarily give us opportunity to grow and develop goals and opportunities for improvement, to understand what's going really well, because I will admit, I don't know what Mr. Raker does all day. I don't know what August does all day. I know when I hear good things, and I know when I hear prickly things, but people say prickly things about everyone, and some people say good things about everyone. So I'd just like to be really balanced, because ultimately I'd like it to be a tool that is a professional tool that is useful to both the end user and to us as a body.
Madam Mayor, if I may, kind of adding to what Councilman Sampson just said about the 360. I know one method to evaluate is you have the same form. Each council person evaluates the person being reviewed. The person that's being reviewed fills the same form out, and you take the two ratings, compare them. It also gives an opportunity to the person that's being reviewed that they can, each 1 second, kind of give information. For example, I give myself a ranking of 4 on a scale of 5. And here's why I think I should. Instead of just throwing a number out there, it says, because as years go by, as time goes by, sometimes we forget what the people are doing. You know, time goes by, year goes by, and sometimes it's almost helpful that the person being reviewed has a chance to remind the person reviewing them, oh, by the way, do you remember I did A, B, and C? And the reviewer may have forgotten some of these things. And vice versa, maybe sometimes the reviewer might remind the person being reviewed of a thing or two. So I think that sometimes can be a helpful tool also.
I agree. I think that's a very wise way to undertake a review.
I just have a question on the history of this document. Was this created outside of the council by individuals, whether they're external or some council members, and then submitted as a whole for approval?
It started out with a group of PhD candidates at Bowling Green University that were going into management, and they wrote the evaluation, and the evaluation was sent to us, and we made it fit in. You know, the categories and the numbering system was all by them. The process, like the memorandum of understanding, that was added to have a way to document that you told the employee, hey, you did a great job, or hey, you did a bad job. And it was a way to make us do our job, to say, you did a great job. I want to put, and at the evaluation period, somebody's got to get all the memorandums and give them to all the council, and they can say, okay, the candidate had a good year or a bad year, or there was 5 things that he did great, and there's a couple things we need to improve. But the memorandum of understanding is to document, because you're allowed, you send it in, and the candidate's supposed to, within 14 days, respond to it. You know, hey, I'm going to fix it. Hey, I'm not going to do a thing with it. You know, it's all about choices. And that's how that was added. But generally, the whole thing was written by the PhD candidates at Bowling Green.
So what would be the best use of the council's time? I mean, we can go line by line with the document. And a lot of things you've said are actually in the document, just
Yeah.
worded a little bit differently, except for maybe the 360 feedback, the self-assessment. And I have a question on record retention, because it's referred to in the document a few times. What is our record retention policy? Because these are HR files.
Well, back when we did it,
The 2 that I have are in their files.
Oh, okay, that's it, okay, all right.
but back when we did this, all the memorandums of understanding were all supposed to go to the mayor, too, and she was supposed to keep it all. But we haven't had that yet, so nobody knows what.
And that's a complicated thing.
Yeah, because it states in the document, the mayor will maintain the final documentation by record retention policy. So I was wondering about that, for
Yeah,
example.
it wouldn't
as a
be,
gap.
for obvious reasons, obviously we're a municipality, we wouldn't be able to do that. I think it was more meant in the sense, at least, and truth be told, I had completely forgotten about this portion of the history, but you mentioned it, and that's exactly right, that's exactly how it transpired, Councilmember Sampson. But the mayor would retain, would collect the information, but retention would always be done by the city, by the municipality.
So she'd be the compiling of all the information, right? Then the
At the
file would
end
be
of
handed
the
over.
review.
Yeah,
correct.
during the year, and then the final thing goes into some magic hole somewhere.
Well, and I think that's what, what August and I are saying, that even during the year, that would have, they would come with certain complications. So the mayor would be the receiving, when we say we receive and file, the mayor would be the receiving member of the body of all this at the end of every review, but then the city would retain, obviously.
Yeah.
So I see a document that has some gaps, probably some review portions of it. Again, I've never been in a special meeting before. So do we want to go line by line and talk about those items? Do we want to use an external body to help us with that? What's the normal process when we revise a council policy?
Well, here, maybe I can shed some light. I mean, so a special meeting is one item usually, and it's exactly what you make of it. So if you wanted to spend the time today going line item by line item, you can certainly do so. If you seek to receive feedback from various stakeholders within the city, you may want to consider doing something different, but it's entirely up to the body. And what I mean by something different is you can collect that feedback, you can set up a workshop where you can move freely and simply adopt whatever you work through the workshop in more laissez-faire fashion, not constrained by some of the rules that we have in place for a special meeting, because this is a voting meeting. And you would then combine all that, simply then add it to the agenda at the next council meeting and vote on it.
I see with Councilman Tinlin has put so much time in this. What's easier for you? You want to go line by line? Because I think that's the best way. We go line by line real quick.
Are you ready to do that?
There may be a bunch of changes
Do
that,
this all night.
there may be a bunch of changes we can just say, it's no big deal, let's change it. And we go through it, and then you
It's smaller
rewrite.
than most documents I'm used to going through, but we can have a discussion.
But
And it-
then you can note all the changes you want. At the end of it, let's vote on turning it over to Mr. Tinlin to rewrite.
So
And
Where your head's at.
thank you for volunteering.
And I have no problem. Again, I don't know the rules, so I write a lot of procedures,
Yeah.
right? So I don't mind helping do a revision to the document, right?
Yeah.
So, and if that's allowed,
Yeah, so, again, council can take a lot of different directions. Obviously, the work that needs to be performed, obviously, in an open session or in some recorded session of some sort.
Like this one.
Like this one.
Yeah.
And the question is, do you want to do that in this kind of a setting? Or do you want to work that in a workshop kind of a session where you're just all working around the table?
We can't vote on the workshop, member.
No, you cannot. But
That's why we decided to do this,
Yeah.
a
That's why
special
we're doing
meeting,
it
so
here,
we can
because
actually accomplish
it-
something and be done with
If
it.
he wants to change something and it's controversial, we vote on it and just get it over with, say, okay, how many want this, how many don't want this, make a motion, vote on it. And when he leaves here, he'll know, don't change this document or this part of the document, go ahead and change this part.
Well,
Add
and-
this.
And it's certainly understandable. The reason, and I don't know that I'm pushing back away from it in any way, shape, or form, but if you're thinking, I'll give you just a couple of things to keep in mind as you make the determination. First, it is a cumbersome tool to, as it currently stands, to review four very different jobs, right, for very different professionals, as this body does. You have no information whatsoever, I can speak for my profession. You have nothing in here that can reasonably assess an attorney's work. I don't know, that's probably information, against my benefit, I suppose, but it's important information for you to have. This is not designed to review an attorney. I don't think it's designed to review a clerk, certainly not a treasurer. It's city manager related. If we're going to if council's will is to go towards that direction, to have a tool that is uniquely qualified to review the position that it is to review, the specific provision, you may wish to take a little more time to be able to have some ideas as far as, what makes sense for the specific positions.
Yeah.
I would supply some information. I presume August would supply some for his, and so on and so forth. Sure.
But-
Second concept, and I'll leave it be. Second concept, what council has to, council knows, but you'll have to remember that we're also operating on contractual agreements with respect to all of these four positions. So the contracts and contract law will always takes precedence when it comes to these particular agreements. So I think, I just wanted you to remember and be aware of that going forward.
And I see that whole package that was written in 2020. It has a body on it of, this is how the evaluation system works. The most complaints we have is this doesn't fit all. If we want to write one differently for each one, that's okay, but that's easily written later. But the memorandum of understanding, the time, the period, who's going to watch what, who's going to collect the stuff, all that we can do tonight, saying this is what we want. Mr. Tinley can write it up. We can vote on it next couple of council meetings, and then work on the individual ones, the checkoff sheets. We can have them redone. But when you look at the checkout sheets, a lot of them are generic because it's when they say budget, well, August will say, I don't have nothing to do with the budget. They all have something to do with their budget. How did they do with their budget? How did they do with, they all talk to the people. How did they talk, have you had complaints on the people? Do people love them? Do they dislike them? A lot of that stuff everybody does, even though it's not their main job. It's still the job of the administration to keep the policy, or keep the people happy, to keep the budget right. So a lot of that still fits everybody, and not just one person.
So the tool we're talking about revising is the original tool that was devised in 2020 and adopted by council.
Yeah.
When I look at that document, the one thing I would really like to do would be to make it, instead of a paragraph with one score, I'd like to break those out. I think it would be much more efficient and effective and a better reflective tool if we take some of the, say, management of the organization. If you were able to break out some of management of the organization categories so that they can be addressed individually, that allows you a better opportunity to actually identify strengths and weaknesses and areas for improvement, as opposed to lumping them all together in one jump category. Like in the end, you'll have a score, but as you're working through the document, you will have an opportunity to say, let's see, this says recognizes accomplishments of staff and other agencies working on behalf of the city. Maybe you get a 6 on that, and then maybe supports professional growth and opportunities within the organization. Maybe you get a 2 on that one, which would skew the number a little bit individually, but you're not worried about the score at the end. You're worried, like our goal throughout this whole process should be finding ways to identify and do things better. So the only way to do that is to break it down a little bit so that we can actually identify key traits to be able to identify how to do them better.
I have no problem with that. That's one of the things I realized when we were doing it. We grouped too much together, so it's just like the person could be terrific in 5 areas, but one of the areas, you missed the budget totally. But so would you score them on the great things he did, or the one thing that the city got sued on? If you break it down, it's a lot better.
Agreed.
But
And Mr. Newshire, you did review this document in 2020, did you not?
That's an interesting question, and Councilmember Sampson asked me and reminded me about the process. As I indicated, I completely forgotten about it. The document was added to the agenda as it came from Bowling Green or whatever the university was at the time. As part of the agenda, I will have reviewed it. I don't believe I made any comments. I wasn't asked to make any comments on it, and I don't believe, and I believe that council made modifications to the document itself. So as a final product, a document review that I would make of this document, meaning to suggest changes, no, I did not make any such review or suggest any changes to it at the time. If you were asked me to review it, I would review it today.
But you did read through it,
I
and
did.
had there been an issue with anything that would be a
Yeah,
blatant
in that sense,
liability
yes,
for
yes,
our
yes,
community,
yes, yeah.
you would have addressed it at that time. Therefore, it's
absolutely.
safe to say you did at least cast your eyes upon it and
I
not
did.
advise against
To the extent that
not
it was in the
using it.
agenda, absolutely, absolutely. But again, I see the same issues with these documents that all 5 of you, that everybody here sees. And, and some of them are minute. Others are more substantive in nature. If you had asked me at the time whether this document, we were ever going to live up to this standard, I would have told you then what I can tell you now, that no. I mean, there's no way you could do 4 reviews. And that brings me to an interesting point, Madam Mayor. You mentioned earlier, and this is, of course, just future conversation, but as you get to it, we use the term periodic review. That's a term of art here because of the OMA and how that applies. So even though I certainly understood and took into account your statement about the nature of the process that you would engage, we wouldn't, nonetheless, would need to call it a review because of the rights that the various employees would have.
Which is fine, except like if we're talking 4 reviews, like reviews can
Right.
be, they can have different weight and they can have they could actually have a total different focus for 3 out of 4 of your reviews. You could focus on, you could have your overall, and then you could focus on communication, staffing, goals, whatever, however you want to break that out, you could do it that way as well. I mean, we're limited by ourselves, and we'll, of course, use a terminology that won't get us in trouble later on. If we can, find people to catch stuff before instead of after, that would be great, but, yeah, we
And the
can
reason
do
we
that.
pick 4, I'm a believer in, you don't want to go a whole year and get at the end of the year and say, and I just said this to Mr. Tinlin, oh, you did this wrong 9 times. The person did not do it not wrong 9 times. If he was told in the first quarter, this is wrong, we don't want this to happen, if you don't tell them the first time, then they did it wrong once, the council did it wrong 8 times because they never told that person, don't do that, that annoys us. But if you tell the person right away, that's annoying or that's wrong, they'll fix it the first time, in the first quarter, it's not even a problem the next ones. It didn't even show up.
So where are we for the schedule? I know you would know this. We were going to stay on
We need to do this by
schedule.
March 4th.
Okay, we'll never meet March 4th. We
Well,
will
March
not-
Let's let
30th,
Mr. Tinlin
actually,
go
March
through.
31st is in the document as your deadline.
Yeah.
And if you read the document too, you're only supposed to use that performance evaluation checklist in your mid-year and final year evaluations. So this is a third quarter review, identify goals that are on track to be met and the goals that may need extra attention. So it's a more of a touch point review
Yeah.
per the requirements. Was that your intent? Because I know you had sent out the email on February 10th telling the staff to get ready for the evaluations.
Yeah, well, that's,
It's page 2.
that would be a question for Mr. Newshire and Mr. Raker. Where do we evaluate him? Because he came in a staggered quarter. We never did say your year is from this date to this date.
Well, the document actually calls that out on page 1 on goal setting. You guys state, or we state as a council, that within the first 15 days of employment
Yeah,
of the new position,
to set the goals.
set the goals.
Yeah.
Yep. So that would have been,
So that's exactly right. And so if council is going to do this item by item, I would propose that perhaps you start with some of these timelines because they're very aggressive. Council meets only once every other week. You have full agendas every time, and I think that's a healthy place to start.
So right now, we're not on target for March 31st at this point because we're still looking at what this is. So the only thing we could do is rely on what we currently have in order to meet that timeline, and I don't think that's necessarily in the spirit of what we're trying to achieve here.
Well, in order to keep with the timelines, we should evaluate them with the policy that's voted in right now for the March 1, and then start the new one April 1st for a new year. And then have the goals, have however we're going to evaluate, all the changes we're going to make, but start that on the 1st. Because we need to do our job by the,
so that's the question I had, so this is a perfect time to ask. If you want to have the March review, do we have a body-approved or accepted goals for those positions? Because you read the document, talks about approved goals. So for the positions we want to review in March, do we have approved or accepted goals for each one of those positions?
you have goals for you wrote them for us, right? Because I know the council back then said, we couldn't decide on big goals, and we said, hey, look, you're new, tell us what you're going to fix, that'll be your goals.
If you look at the very first Friday feedback, in my first week, I met with all the department heads, I met with all the elected officials, and I reported what the priorities would be from then until the end of the budget.
Yeah, that would be the goals. So we take them goals and see how he made out with them goals.
In August, we came up with goals for you in your review. We 100% did. And as a matter of fact, I asked you for a writing of them, and you said, I have them on my machine.
They weren't, there was a couple things you suggested that are actually magneted to the safe that I look at. It was like review the minutes, make sure they're all up to date, things like that, like minute audits, but they
Correct.
weren't goals.
Things like that, right?
They were just a couple of things, like get this done next week. So it was kind of what I did.
Okay, I'll go back and watch the tape then.
Well, there was no tape, we were in a
Draft
closed
one.
session, but
Oh.
I understand what the mayor's saying.
there wasn't goals that were presented. Yeah, there wasn't original goals, but it wasn't from that meeting. There is one.
We just need to,
Yeah, we all have
whatever the
it.
documented goal is, give us a copy of them.
Because you have another bullet item here on
Yeah, I mean,
page
there's
3.
one.
Only written documentation that follow the proper procedures can be used for the formal evaluation.
That would be the memo of understanding. And goals and.
Goals, yeah.
And voted.
Because, yeah, if you jump back to the first page, it says employee in the city council and agreed to be involved, let's see, I'm sorry. It's talking about goals to be agreed upon by the employee and city council. So that's what I'm saying, if we're going to do the March, right, does the body have accepted or approved goals? And then I had another gap, if we do that, just if the performance tool is worded more for city manager, but we can probably get past that. But you start with goals that are agreed upon. So that was the question I had, if we do want to continue with this tool until we figure it out, what's your opinion?
Well, I would say we evaluate with the policy 2020-01, because that was approved by the council. Everybody had their chance to give us goals, so we have documentation of what they were going to work towards. Take that and evaluate their goals and all the way the year went, and start the new, I don't know if we would change the policy number, 2020 or 20-01B, or, or I don't, we have to give it a new number, but refine the document we got, put the dates in, and then set the goals. The goal setting is going to be a couple weeks off, but set new goals for everybody, set new dates that we're going to evaluate, because does that say December or March 31st for everybody?
Yeah, March 31st for just that touch point, identify goals that are on track to be met. And then June 30th says your year-end summary and adoption of new goals for next fiscal year. So that's your June 30th, you're ending up your fiscal budget and then resetting for the next of the year. So that's the next big date. That's where you will use the formal performance checklist and ranking system or rating system. So again, I'm new to this, so based on your guys' knowledge, do you think we're prepared to be able to do performance reviews for our direct reports based on goals that are written somewhere? Because at the end of the day, a performance review is supposed to be about to managing performance, setting expectations.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, sir.
So in conversation here, if I understood the city attorney correctly, because this whole graduate PhD stuff, I've never heard of that until just now. Would it be wise, since you mentioned that the council had added to the document,
Modified it, yes.
modified it,
Yes.
to do a review, a legal review of it at this point in time, or is that just futile?
I mean, I would recommend it, obviously, not just a legal review, but a whole, I think in ordinary sense, how things like these occur in any municipality, and what I would recommend is you send it to administration to be able to make modifications, proposals for council with all your commentary that you can submit to the administration if you wish. We bring you that work product. It's the same process that we engage with respect to any other aspect of our municipal work. When we craft an ordinance, you give us the direction, we produce back from feedback, we produce back a work product, and then we keep modifying that. I think that makes sense. If council wishes to go another direction, council can go a different direction, but that makes sense. At different times, it was before you, Mr. Raker, at different times, council recommended that we go outside, and I think it may have been, I can never rely on my memory, but I believe it was after this tool, at one point or another, as we were talking about the HR process, the conversation from council was that we should seek outside professional help in designing these documents. So, those are all the ways that all the paths are available to you.
Yeah, well, there's a motion that was passed to get bids on the HR,
Yes.
farming out the HR, and that never went anyplace. So
But that
that's-
wouldn't include these performance reviews. That would be outside of the scope of these performance reviews. And I do have a question. You were our counsel in 2020 when we took this on. I want to know why today it's important for you to give it an overall legal review, and it wasn't then. Please explain that to me.
It's been the case for me all along. I told you at my own, and now we're breaking sort of we're breaking privilege, but I guess it was my review. But at my review, you, Madam Mayor, it was a closed session, which is what I mean by breaking privilege. But since it was my review, I can tell you that at that closed session, you asked me the question, and I thought I told you at that time that it was flawed with respect to the same statement that I made today, with respect to every other position. It's a flawed document.
I mean, I can tell you that I have sat here and said, we can't use that form for August's review. August, can you back me up
I
on this?
remember that.
You guys submitted that,
And I
and
brought a
I
different
said,
one,
no,
right.
it doesn't match it. I don't think we're sitting here today trying to say this document should be used for all personnel. It was drafted with the idea of a city manager. It is not perfect. It is a starting point. If we want to stay on schedule, it's something we can utilize. We can put our efforts into creating something that is far more fine-tuned for what we do and maybe for people's individual goals for what they want this to look like. But we're not trying, please, is anyone here trying to make this document work for all appointed officials' reviews? Raise your hand.
I can comment on that.
No, I'm not you. You're not part of the process. But just a
I'm
minute.
actually part of the conversation,
I will allow you to speak, but just 1 second,
The
please.
charter allows me to speak.
The structure part,
Thanks, Mr. Raker, for always playing nice.
yeah, the structure part, I think should be, fits everybody. You do them 4 times a year. This is, you give them a formal, you give them a written, whatever, all that should be one, so everybody's treated the same way. Whether it's the checklist, it needs to be rewritten for all 4.
Right, we fine tune it for their
Yeah,
specific
but-
tasks and duties, of
but-
course.
But the main part of that policy stays the same, it makes some difference for what we found out was too hard, at the end, nowhere in there says that your all the stuff that I write, who do I give that to? That's the stuff we need to spell out in a new policy, that everybody has to do it, has to send the mayor a typewritten copy of their comments that night, and it all goes to one person. And then we should pick a scribe to put everything together and say, okay, you had 3 people concerned about the roads and they didn't get fixed, or you did a great job fixing the roads. 3 people said that, and somebody has to compile it all. Then they bring it back to this body, and we all read it, and we all vote on the comments and the rating. And then it's a vote. So that part needs to be done for everybody the same way. All the checklists can be rewritten. I mean, it's because when I read them, you can make them fit everybody, because they're all responsible for a lot of that stuff. But if you want to get more specific, and I like the more specific part, because then we can talk individually. I don't have to give them a 6 because he did 5 good things, but the one thing that somebody did wrong cost the city millions of dollars. Then you give him a 2, and you'd say, well, he did 6 good things, but 1 bad thing. Well, hey, that's how it works out. So breaking it up is going to be better, a lot better.
But if I may, some process where because the process you just described would mean that you would come back on more than one occasion, which would mean that you would go into if the employee himself or herself requests a closed session for the review, as they have the right to do,
Yeah.
that would mean that you would go into closed session more than on one occasion for the same process.
Yeah.
And so, again, I would, it's entirely up to you, obviously, as a body, but I would just, they may make it cumbersome as far as the timeline that you currently have, or even potentially some timeline that you may establish down the road.
Well, that can be solved by, one meeting, we can evaluate 2 people. And if we have to go in closed session, out of closed session, back into closed session, that's our problem, because that's what we get paid for that, We need to be fair with the people. If they want to go to closed session, let's go. If they want it in public, I don't care. But we need to pick a night, and it's going to be evaluation night, and everybody gets their 2 hours of fame or whatever. But it should be written down, so none of us have to sit here thinking, what date, it should be spelled out, March 31st. So the meeting before March 31st is the date you're going to get evaluated. We all know that it's good, because we have to be done by the 31st, so we got to meet the last meeting in March, evaluate the person. All of us give our comments, by the 31st, we have to have a scribe to put it all together and say, this is what I hear to say. We vote on the 31st, you know, you get a total 5 or a total 2 or whatever. But we all vote on the 2, and that's the person's evaluation for that year.
But March 31st is supposed to be a touch point. It's not necessarily, from what I understand, is that the form should be used for the year-end evaluation and a mid-year, and that,
But at the end, the last one, somebody's got to say, you had a successful year, a rotten year, a fantastic year. They could be weighted, whether you put a number on them, or you say, you know, met, exceeded, more than exceeded, you know, whatever all the terms we're going to use. We got to vote that night on all our comments, and we have to agree on which one of these lines we're picking to say, you've had a very successful year.
for the touch point?
No.
Is that the?
For everything, for the evaluation itself.
Okay.
At the end of the year, we have to have a rating system to say, you had a good year, bad year. And it could be 5 categories, you know, but we need to be able to say that this wasn't a successful year, or this was a successful year.
Okay. And I guess my concern is, you know, the frequency and the level of which each one of these meetings is going to, and reviews is going to rise to, right? That we potentially have 16 different closed sessions that have varying degrees of weight, right? With obviously one being the final culmination
Yeah.
for the end of the year.
But we got employees, they need to be treated good. So we need to, if they want a closed session, have a closed session. If they want to do it in the open, they open. We need to be able to tell them, you did good, you know, this quarter was great, this was a problem to me, and
That's where I have a little heartburn on.
so they can fix it.
Yeah, I have heartburn on the quarterly aspect of it. That's, to me, it's a little too frequent.
I agree.
That if it can be fine-tuned into the, you know, half-year evaluation. You know, obviously, if somebody wants to have a special meeting regarding a touch point, I guess that's not a problem, but I would rather stick to having it just be what the goal setting is, having the half-year review on where we are in achieving those goals, whether or not they need to be reevaluated. Maybe some goals don't even apply anymore within 6 months, and then have that final review 12 months later. I just think that's what I'm accustomed to. I think many other people that may have that same experience in their reviews.
And we could modify the document, and you can place a statement in there if we have something significant objective change during the year, because things change, or we have a performance concern, the body can request a touch point evaluation. So we can put some wording in there to give us a backdoor. If we need, something changes, or we have concerns, we can, as a body, vote to ask for a quarterly evaluation of the individual. So there's ways we can write this document, but this document locks us in pretty firm on very frequent and heavily documented performance reviews. And I think that's why we've struggled with it, right? We've had it for a couple of years, and have we ever successfully did all the documentation and hit any employee yet?
We haven't had employees to
Oh,
have
yeah,
the
I know we
pleasure
went
to
through last year,
perform
yeah, that's
these,
right.
So you're the test child.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I guess we've kind of bounced around the topic, but when I heard they were doing quarterly reviews, I've never been in agree with that at all. I think 4 times a year is too frequent. I think traditionally you have to have at least one a year, and usually a mid-year. The mid-year tends to be kind of a lightweight checkup review. So something like what the forms are looking at, I envision this as being a once-a-year exercise. And then we have a mid-year review, which is, again, lighter. Does everyone agree with that?
I see the check sheet, that's what was written for the months that you don't want to write up specifics, like, you know, we were all supposed to fill them out and just, we're actually, the best way to do it now would be to fill them out, give them to the mayor, she gives them whoever the candidate is, and they look through and going, well, they like the way I talked to the community. They like this. They don't like this. And it's just a checkoff sheet. They can say, I'm doing good here. I really need to talk to the council people, see why don't they like the way I talk to, and you give them, but twice a year document hard what the problems were or what the successes were. And then you have the mid-year you do that on, and then the end of the year, we've told you 2 or 3 times that we needed this improved. It never got improved, so it's a failure, or you did a great job, and we see how the way you progressed all the way up, and you did a fantastic job.
So it sounds like you're agreeing with me that twice a year is adequate.
For a formal evaluation,
Okay.
but you still need to tell them twice a year. You don't want to go 6 months. It's going to be the thing, for the last 6 months, you've been doing this wrong. Well, no, they did it wrong the first day, and then they did it wrong 3 weeks later. If you'd have told them, somewhere in that first 6 months, or first 3 months of the 6 months, they could have fixed it, and you wouldn't have had a problem.
I see where you're getting at, but I think communication in between the 6-month intervals, I think would be adequate to either just have an email communication or even verbal communication.
Well, that's what a memorandum of understanding was, to document what your feelings were. Hey, you did a great job here. This is why you did a great job. And then, even with a good one, the candidate can rebut it and say, or they can actually say, hey, thank you for the comment. And they send it back to you. But it's not one person, it's all of us. So if I was to write one up, everybody gets it on the council and the candidate.
But it's still documented.
It's still documented, and then the response comes back to everybody on the council, and the candidate keeps it. So it's a tracking thing of, I've been told a lot of times that was important, and I didn't do nothing with it, or, God, you fixed it immediately, what a great job. Then we pull all this documentation at the end of the year, and we can give a person an evaluation that really counts, and not just trying to make up notes on the last day. Because too often, I've seen people try to evaluate them 2 weeks before their evaluation. It's only a year, and they remember everything for the last 2 months. They don't remember a year ago how he saved the world.
Well, but I think in the formal evaluation, that could be addressed there, where the person being reviewed rates themselves and provides backup information. Oh, by the way, boss, I remember I did this. I think that would be adequate. I don't think we need to have an every 3-month discussion, is my.
Oh, no, but in discussion, I said, the off two would be, you fill out the questionnaire part, just send it to them. If they're saying you gave a 0, you go, why'd you give me a 0? They would actually have the chance to call the person and say, you gave me a 0, why? And then it can be a one-on-one with the person, and you can say, that's how I feel. If the candidate chooses to listen to one person say, why, that annoys you, then they can make a change. If they choose not to do it, then it's finalized in writing, and then at the end of the year, it's a final evaluation. You can say, I sent you this, I sent you a memorandum of understanding, you didn't do anything, you failed on that area. But hey, on this one, I sent you a memorandum of understanding because you did such a great job. What the problem is, it makes us work more, but it's okay. That's what we're getting paid for. We need to.
So what I'd like to ensure is that this tool does not ever come across like one individual's opinion equates into any more weight than any other individual opinion, because in the end, we're a body, right? So the culmination of 5 people's ideas, whether we agree or disagree, or we're all over the board, the ultimate determination of function is what the board itself comes up with, right? There's an opportunity. I think the most important opportunity we have is 5 very different people is to present 5 very differing views and hopefully encouragement and, desires and goals to like make things better and to help someone succeed. Because again, I want to say that I only like to look at performance tools as a method to help someone succeed at what they do, because it ultimately helps us all succeed. So I just want to ensure that whatever we do, that it doesn't have that option for an individual to send information off on their own, to make it seem like one person has that extra weight to be able to do that. And I think that's the flawed portion of the quarterly review as it's set up now. I personally believe we function together quite often, and we should be able to have the opportunity to share what's going right and what's going wrong on a regular basis without having to have something formal now for every quarter. Saying that, as it's already been said, if something comes up and there is a need for something, if something egregious happens or something spectacular happens, and we need to have a quarterly or an additional, we can always call a meeting with any of our staff members to address any issue. So we have that capacity already without adding it into a formalized portion of this. And I understand the idea of it. I do get the whole quarterly thing. But the way I'm hearing it, it concerns me with the touchy feelings around this place. It really concerns me. And I really just want to see this as a tool that's used for good. I think it's really important.
But think about this, the two off evaluations is just filled out by us, sent to the candidate, and then we can send it to each other. That's easy to do. But if the candidate reads the same question, 5 people send them what they, and that person got low scores in one area from 3 people, they would eventually say, why does this group feel this way and this group feel this way? What do I need? It gives them an opportunity. What do I need to change? Or gives me the opportunity to say, I'm not changing nothing because I don't care. It's their choice at that time. It takes away the thing of, I never knew that really bothered 3 people on the council.
But I think
It doesn't go a whole year, and then we say, he did this wrong all year. Well, geez, if you'd have told me day one, I would have fixed it.
But again,
I'm sorry.
that description that you just gave gives the opportunity for 5 individuals to send 5 separate documents to one person. And you used the word group, and that is how people think of this body. And I think we need to try and eliminate that as much as possible. And I think critiquing and reinforcement comes across better as a group than it does individually. Because even if we're sitting here and doing an evaluation together, if I think someone underperforms and someone else thinks they overperform, if we have a conversation, I might change my underperforming, my thoughts of that might come up, not knowing the entirety of a situation, not knowing the entirety of the scope. And what I really think is critical is that people don't feel attacked in any way or feel like there's a potential for a seeming attack by an individual. Right? It's bad enough if a body comes to a conclusion, but I don't really want to give that opportunity. And I think submitting documents that way seems like it gives that opportunity. But it seems like it gives the opportunity for one piece of paper, one opinion to have more weight over another, and it shouldn't ever be that.
It never would, because that's only comments going to the person twice a year to say, am I proving? The 2 that really count are the mid and the end. And the comments were ways to make everybody document up to that point what you liked and what you didn't like. And there's a paper trail for everything. So if anything happens, good or bad, you have a paper trail why you did it. Why'd you give him a magnificent race? Because he did. God, he was like walking on water all year. And Lou said he was walking on water, and Scott said he was walking on water.
Can we ask for, can we get attention for speaking? Because there's so many people who want to speak. And I see both of you wanting to go at the same time, and if we could just
I
do
think
it
everybody's about
the
to say
right
the same
way,
thing.
then
So
I'll
if we
feel
look
better.
at page 3, what we were just discussing about the memorandum of understanding, I think there needs clarification, because the way this reads, it says ongoing documentations of successes, concerns of failure by a council member. So it's not just for performance review based on how this is written, it's for any time. That's how I interpret it. And there's 5 points of really clarifying when they have a concern, they use this document, and they go through all these protocols of how to do it. So I think we had a good discussion here, but maybe clarification, is it just going to be used for performance reviews, or is it an ongoing living document that we use at our discretion to address those positions as a council member?
This was supposed to be used all year.
Yep.
Whether it's good or bad. If you thought it was important enough to put on as an evaluation, you'd send one of these saying, hey, you did a great job that day. I really appreciate that. Or that didn't make it, and you need to correct it. How are you going to correct it? And have them send it to the body saying,
Mr. Nusha, you tried to speak.
Well, no, thank you. And actually, I was going to point out, I think I was going to point out exactly the same thing. And there's an issue, it only becomes an issue with the communication with the body as a whole. When you take such a document, if you interpret it, letter, and you're sharing a document, there's the potential there for, there's a potential there for having OMA violation as a document that is substantive in nature and compiles the thoughts of one person. If everybody else starts responding with their thoughts on a document that is, whether they're contrary or not, arguably speaking, now, the situation would have, it's a perfect storm, but arguably, you can have an OMA violation because you could be talking about decision-making. If the next meeting we have, based on this communication, that may have started benign, very benignly, but at the next meeting, the body realizes that 3 out of 5 members agree that this person should be let go, and an action is taken, then all of a sudden, if the action is taken, all of a sudden, the previous communication becomes an OMA violation, right? Whereas it may have started in benign fashion, it could end in something that we wouldn't want to engage in. That's part of the, that's one of the concerns that you ought to keep in mind.
Okay,
This was written back then, like I would write it and send it to the mayor, because she works for me. And I just say, this is a problem with mine, you need to fix it. And then she comes back, it's really a document between, it's so I don't come in here and say, I stopped by your office and told you, and you, oh, I don't remember that. This, it's like, here, I sent this to you, you put on the bottom, oh, I'm not doing anything anyway. It's a document, so it keeps us from badgering. You just send the documents in, and they do what they want. If they're gonna fix it within a week, you fix it. If it's a praise, they say thank you and document it. But it's a way to make sure that the employee knows how you feel, not at the end of the day.
I don't think, I mean, I'm not disputing the spirit of the action. It being not just benign, but something to force for good.
But if I wrote it up for Paul and sent it to everybody, and sent it to her, I'm sending a courtesy copy to all of you, so you know what I did. If she blows it off, she blows it off. That's between me and her. At the end of the year, we talk about, why didn't you do anything? I said, well, I didn't feel like it was important.
But see,
But if another council member, they're at least seeing what we're doing between each other.
Yeah, but that's the difficulty with it, because now, as speaking specifically with respect to the 4 employees that you have under your tutelage, that you appoint and remove, pursuant to the OMA, each employee has the right to engage, to do their evaluation in closed session. And that action of yours, when shared as when the body receives it, now it becomes an evaluation that it should be covered by the rules that the OMA provides. That's the trick bag, I think.
This is not an evaluation. This is a problem. You send it to the person, they tell you whether they can solve it or not.
You're fine up until there.
Yeah, and
Mr. Raker.
and everybody has a chance to look at, so if I hear the same thing and Glenn hears the same thing, and he sees I already sent it to the city manager, he's not going to do it because he's like, well, Lou already addressed it.
Yeah, and I
And it's
understand. I think
documented.
you're starting on solid footing. But
Yeah.
I think there's a potential for a problem the moment we start sharing with other members of council. That's the problem. When you start and say, I'm going to send this to Rennes, thank you very much, you really screwed this one up. I appreciate that. I take it, there's not an issue. I will take it, I'll either perform according to specification, or I will not, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
The moment you say, and I'm going to share with Bruce, Paula, Scott, and Glenn, and now we have a problem, because my evaluation, that's considered an evaluation as a matter of law, and that evaluation, all I have to say is, that should have been a closed session, because if you had told me, if you had put it up on notice, first of all, we would have to notice it up, but I would have requested a closed session. Instant violation. We wouldn't want to set up this council for that. You see what I mean? You start fine, but it's that moment that's a problem.
Yeah. So Rennes, I think what you're I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Call your last one, and no one else interrupt, because I'm backtracking to Mr. Raker, who's been waiting for like 20 minutes.
No, Mr. Nish, I covered my comments.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I guess, Rennes, I think where we're going with this is, any evaluation should follow a rigid, well-documented process.
Yes.
If it's ongoing, that's not rigid, and it's not well-documented.
not
So
necessary.
after all, whether it's Mr. Raker or other people being evaluated, they report not to an individual, but to the body. So I think through the process, the body evaluates them.
Absolutely.
We all have our individual opinions. I guess, Lou, I'm sorry, Councilman Sampson, I think it may not work well if we share our individual opinions on a regular basis with the employee being evaluated, because in essence, he's in the middle of our debates, because believe it or not, we may not always agree on the evaluation of somebody. So I think the debates need to be held in public, the process should be rigid, and I think twice a year, I think we're in agreement on the twice a year part. It's the in-between, right? And I think any other communication, I think, has to be severely limited. Am I correct on this?
Yeah, I think I would agree. It just limits the potential for problems. I think, again, I'm not quarreling with, the quality of the process as you begin it and the intent of it. However, in practice, we can definitely foresee problems.
And tell us how we can do it, where everybody knows that we have a problem here, and it's been brought to somebody's attention, and we don't have to wait a whole year to get it fixed.
Well,
So how do we do it? Do we bring this
think you'd
memorandum
have
to the next council meeting
Yeah, I
and
think
vote
you-
on it?
yeah, you-
That's easy enough, but I have no problem with that.
Yeah, I think you would have to, and I understand your sense of wanting to do it in such fashion to give the person, because I think you're starting from a point where I'm trying to give you the privacy
Yeah.
of, so, and that's what I mean, that you start from, the spirit and the intent of it is perfectly fine, more than fine. But I think practically speaking, given some of the constraints that as a municipality we're bound by, I think that creates an issue. So I think the solution, unfortunately, is that on the ongoing basis, I think I disagree with the mayor. I don't know that we have anybody so brittle that won't be able to take a criticism around here. So I think we will take him meeting after meeting as you dole it out.
No, I don't have a problem writing that up
Right.
and then bring it and send it to them, and then at the next meeting, give it to everybody on the board, or have them set, in the package.
Well, see, that's the problem, though, when you start sharing within the board, because.
So we can vote on, we can put a
And
thing
the
on.
meeting, but the meeting is a
Public.
problem as well, because if you stand up and you say, Joe, I sent you this evaluation, Madam Mayor, fellow members of council, I sent this evaluation. It's like, Joe says, I request a closed session, thank you very much. What is this conversation happening here? The only conversation that can happen in front of the public then would be after the closed session.
No, that's easily fixed because we vote immediately to go into closed session and talk about this memorandum.
Yes. Yeah, I mean,
Understand.
that's, absolutely you can do that, but it's, is this what you're willing to do, is I guess.
Yeah, I'm
So
willing to
I'm
do it.
engaging you in the step-by-step so that so that you understand the steps basically that we would be, the body would be forced or constrained to follow, and then consider as a body whether that's what you want to do or not.
But we
How-
need those steps, I'm sorry, Madam Mayor.
That's okay, go ahead.
I was just going to say, that we need those steps itemized in a procedure on how to do that. And right now, it's,
Yeah, and if I may, and like, I don't know how much I'm gonna complicate it, but, we have in our contracts, or in the three contracts, the contract that I have with the city is a fee agreement, an attorney fee agreement, it's a little different. The other three employees have a specific contract, and they all have, now, I only have one of them up right now, but they have a performance evaluation in the contractual agreement that the body agree with them. And we kept it somewhat broad to be able to account for this, but nonetheless, it has some designation. So it has 4 or 5 parts to it under the performance evaluation. It talks about process. It says, mayor and council agree to meet with employee pursuant to the city of Clawson's outlined and adopted evaluation procedure for the purpose of defining goals and performance objectives which they determine necessary for the proper operation of the city and the attainment of the city's policy objectives. Council shall establish relative priority among the various goals and objectives and reduce them to writing. Said goals and objectives shall generally be attainable within the time limitations as specified and the annual operating and capital budgets and appropriations provided. Part B says assessment. Council and employees shall meet at least annually to evaluate and assess performance of employee in meeting or progressing towards the goals formally adopted by the employer. C says concerns. Mayor and council members are encouraged to periodically identify concerns in accordance with the evaluation policy established and adopted by city council. That's broad. I think that's getting to your point, but it's just broad in nature without any specificity. D says unsatisfactory performance. In the event council determines that the performance of employees is unsatisfactory in any respect or needs significant improvement in any area, council shall describe these concerns in writing in reasonable detail or with specific examples as to the objective and positive as reflected in the evaluation policy. An adequate opportunity shall be provided for an employee to discuss the evaluation with the council. Pursuant to the dictates of the Michigan Open Meetings Act, employees shall always have the right to request that any of the provisions of Section 7 can be conducted in closed session, right? Any of the provisions. And then lastly, reference says, in effect, in provisions of the sections, council and employee mutually agree to abide by the provisions of applicable law. So I think fairly describes the process that council is attempting to engage in, but at the same time also addresses the Michigan Open Meetings Act concern that is always sort of over us.
Well, let us write up whatever the changes that Mr. Tinlin wants. Give it to you and you tell us how to do it right. You know, if we have to call for a closed session or call a person and say, we got to get this to you, whatever it is.
And my recommendation would be, don't just, there's 10 of us lawyers in my office. We'll all 10 of us, spend the time to look at it and come up with something. Don't just rely on us. Obviously, we'll take all your opinions, but submit it. We need the city managers, the office, I should say, to take a look at it. I think your suggestion or whomever's suggestion earlier that we reach out to all the employees, this is going to be valuable feedback. The timeline, it's entirely up to the body. The timeline that you have outlined here, you can meet it with this tool. It's not ideal. It is what it is. It has its flaws. It has its benefits. You can utilize it until you come up with a proper tool or simply give yourself time. That's entirely up to the body.
I think I said that. We need to evaluate them.
That's why I repeated it. I thought you were right.
What we got, that was the approved policy we have today. Until we replace the approved policy, we got to use that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that, contractually so. Contractually so. Flawed as it may be, I think that's you proceed. But I think you're moving.
This body inherited everything that came from the other body. We're still the same body,
That's right.
so there's no change. So we use this one to finish the evaluations on March 31st. Figure out how we want to evaluate everybody from now on.
Entirely up to this
Start at
body.
April 1st, and that would be the best way.
So for the starting point for Mr. Tinlin, so I think it might be better for you to understand from a legal perspective what those flaws are, and then potentially incorporate that into what your intention is. Since we've so bequeathed you with
The scribe now for all the items and enhancements.
Yeah, and I think, and I don't want to, because we talk about flaws, but I don't know that I myself think about it in those terms as far as this document is concerned. I just have,
Risks, is that a better term?
Yeah, there's some risk and some, we always want to proceed in such fashion to where, we're not unwittingly falling into, by trying to do something good, we unwittingly fall into a position where we're making a hasty mistake. Because the OMA is very cumbersome, unfortunately.
Yeah.
A lot of things, there's both, not a tendency, but, the normal process that we engage in has to be an open process, which occurs right here. However, employees and everybody that gets evaluated by this tool have the right, pursuant to the MA, to have their periodic evaluation in closed session. And then now all of a sudden we're constrained therein. So that's overall, like if I'm speaking to specifically to Mr. Tinlin, that's overall the thought, right? That's the overriding concern that we have. Then there's a mix of, as I mentioned earlier, there's a mix of, a review of the contractual agreements with all four employees or, members, that this body reviews, I think is necessary. And I think if you're going to, I think it certainly sounded to me as if the body is thinking in proceeding in terms of, with the passing of time, at the appropriate time, moving towards more individualized for each position, individualized tools, while keeping the same general structure, because obviously the concepts apply across the board, but having it somewhat more tailored than what it currently is, and moving towards the, perhaps not quarterly review, but something twice a year is what it sounded like.
So if we had Mr. Tinlin, because he volunteered and he raised his hand here, make the changes that we all talk about, and say, this is what a perfect world to us would be. Then we come to you and hand it to you and say, is this okay? And you say, when you do one of these documents, this is what you have to do with it. And put it down right in the paper going, you got to send 3 copies with 2 stamps on each one of them and a return envelope. And you just tell us exactly what we got to do, and we follow that so we don't get in trouble. And it's a working
Yeah,
document. then.
it's a process that, yeah, I think it would mirror that to a great extent. What I would propose, and I think what, Mr. Raker is proposing as well, it's a process where you tell us your thoughts, and however you communicate those thoughts, whether it be in public or certainly an email to myself or to Mr. Raker, like, this is my 2 cents with respect to this, as you guys engage in the process of producing a working document back to us. And that document is subject to FOIA, so that's perfectly acceptable, that email is perfectly acceptable. And then we would take all those and bring you back, a proposed document. You talk about it in the next session, you analyze it, you throw down whatever you don't like, you pick up whatever you do like, until we get to the point. It's just exactly what we engage in every other process, right? We do so with respect to ordinances, this is no different.
Okay.
So it is,
Let's go.
during this process, if it may be allowed, that it'll be a comparison to what we have and
Yeah.
potentially where we could
I'll
be
tell you
going.
what Mr. Raker has probably even, a lot more, as an attorney, we take topics or issues that are presented sort of top down. I don't have, breadth of scope. I just take them linearly down. Mr. Raker will have a whole lot more experience with this, obviously, so his input is necessary. What I'm going to do is, I'm also going to look, I'm going to do the same thing that I presume all 5 of you did, which is, you take your experiences and look at what other places are doing. I just have the benefit of, getting input from, other fellow attorneys that we have in our Michigan Municipal League, that I'm going to reach out to and see, well, I'm going to get a few tools around. That's what I do with every ordinance that I present to you, to this body, and then we craft that agreement. I think if the body says, what I'm hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, that as conceptually, this is appropriate, right? And with the caveat of, making certain separations, and I heard you, Mr. Mayor, pardon me, Madam Mayor.
Call me whatever you want. It doesn't matter to me.
Thank you.
I got him.
Yeah, thank you. Well deserved, thank you. Madam Mayor, I think with, breaking some of those categories, I think to better align this as a tool, I think taking all those, I think makes sense. And then again, all we're doing as administration is producing it back to you. You're the ones responsible in the end for adopting it, rejecting it, asking for modifications. It may be a process, I started doing this for this city at the tail end of a year and a half of talking about a chicken ordinance. I think, this is worth the time. I don't think we're going to spend a year and a half, but if we spend it on chickens, I think this is certainly worth it.
I would like to say that what you just said sounds expensive, and I personally am tired of us spending dollars for things we shouldn't be spending dollars for. And I think, and I know you're going to say with due respect something, but let me finish before you do that. I'm not finished. I think the document that we have, we could fine tune it without a lot of effort and without a lot of expense. And I think it does, I've done a lot of looking at different cities' things, and there's some pretty good ones and there's some not very good ones at all that are way worse than this, right? This document, the standard is whatever standard we create. Like, we can make this as difficult as we want, and it seems like we've already tried to make it a little bit difficult tonight. The goal of a performance evaluation, I will say it again, is to find the strengths and areas of improvement to try and ensure that our staff can best serve the functions that they're entitled to do, they're set up to do. And I personally believe this tool can do it. We just need to fine tune it some. So I would suggest everyone maybe go out, come back with some break it out a little bit, and then share notes, and then maybe go from there instead of trying to create something new, because other than maybe expounding on a couple areas, I don't know that it's worth the money, honestly.
If I may address, Councilmember Simmons, I apologize, go ahead, I didn't mean to interrupt. No, I was going to say, you're already paying the city manager. This is a part of my, I wouldn't be billing additionally, Clausen, as this is part of the fee agreement that we have with Clausen. This is within the scope of work that is already billed to Clausen. There's nothing additional here.
But you only give us 7.5 hours a week, and
No, ma'am, that's not
That's
true.
what you've told us in the past.
No.
I'm just trying to be prudent, and
You're not being
he's
prudent.
always busy.
You're not being
so-
prudent, ma'am, Mayor. You're just misconstruing the statement. I said you pay for 7.5 hours a week. As to what you get is a lot more than that. And so to construe that as anything else is inappropriate.
I
So
wasn't trying to condemn you.
understand
I
that.
thought I understood that we pay you for 7.5 hours,
You
and
do.
then that's what you give us.
You do. No, ma'am.
And I
If-
see you a lot, so I don't know how that works, but I know you have different functions too. So I'm not picking on you. Please don't even try and make it look like I am. I am not. I'm trying to be a
I'm
good
simply
steward of our
correcting-
community's money
I appreciate
and
it.
for a function that is important but not critically essential to cost us more money. We
And I just
spend a
told
lot
you
of
that.
money,
Yeah, I
part of this
understood.
body,
I
for
just
things
told
that
you
shouldn't have been
that
spent.
it
That's all I'm
wouldn't
trying
cost
to
you.
do.
I
Let's
just
get
told
back
you
on
that.
subject.
That is subject.
How about if we have Councilman Tenlin break it up like he wants, or right now, first, tell us what you see,
Well,
and then break it up.
I see about 12 points, whether there's a clarification of terms, decision, whether it's a risk from legal or an HR standpoint, and then I can provide a document with the comments on the side saying, do we really want to do this? I call it simplification of the process, and I can give a starting draft document, and then you guys can edit from there.
Well, and I see once we get what we think is the final document, then we give it to the attorney and say, is this okay? And when you say you can't do that, you violate the Open Meeting Act, don't tell me I violated the Open Meetings Act. Tell me how I don't. You
Correct.
need to 3 stamps on this envelope, send it to these 14 people, and you write it down. So when we do that, we do it the way you told us to do it, and we won't, if we got to have a special meeting, closed session, make the offer, we do all that. They're just steps. The closed session, it's going to be a phone call by the mayor going, we're going to talk about you. You want to do it in public or private? I want to do it in public, not a problem.
Can't even do that.
Yeah.
And then we do that.
Yeah, I
Can't even ask
understand,
that.
but yeah, again, and that's part of the problem. May I, because I think we're dancing around, like there's an 800-pound gorilla, Mr. Tinlin, and that is your write-up. Could you blow through it? Is there any chance of you to go through those right now so we can have them out in open session?
Probably not, because if I had known, I could have generated that document.
Okay.
Because really, the front pages, there's not too much issues. It's the middle where we have the mechanics of the process, where we talk about all the do's and don'ts and required documents. But I could probably generate a summary document within a day, because I've been working on this for a while. But nothing here now, unless, that's why I was saying we could walk through it, because I got everything underlined, but not a document I can share.
Walk through it. If the mayor's all right with that, let's walk through it.
I'm just one person sitting here, so it has nothing to do with me. If you guys
Do
want, if you're
consensus.
prepared and you want to do it, I'm fine listening to it, of course. And just for the record, I was not insinuating we do not get legal opinion upon a finalized document. I just didn't want to make a lot of work for not a lot of good reason, just for clarification.
So if you want to start on the first page, you have a go ahead.
Mayor, before we do this, can I request a brief recess?
A brief recess?
A brief break, yeah.
Sure.
Just before we.
We're going to
start
take a
pounding the details.
5-7 minute break. We'll be back at 8:30. If everyone's good with that? Thanks.
I told you. I'd be over at 9 o'clock to pick up the trailer. And he looks at, he says, I'll bet you $50 you ain't out of there till 10.
No, we're not staying here till 11. This is your case. Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. No way. Okay, we're back, and we're going to pick up where we left off, which is Councilmember Tinlin, you're going to, I don't know what you're going to do. You're going to do something.
I'm going to walk you through. So I'm going to recommend that we just talk about the mechanics of the document. You know, what we're saying we're going to do. The tools do need some enhancements for those different positions, but if we have an agreed-upon process, those tools can be modified for those positions. That's my recommendation. So if we want to go to the first page, the background is essentially your scope of your document, and I didn't see anything really issues with that. We had some wording changes from you, Madam Mayor, talking about strengths and areas of improvement that could be incorporated into that scope statement. For me, the background was fine. Then if you go through, there's 4 components of the evaluation process, and I did have questions. There's a procedure for documenting outstanding performance in areas where improvements is needed by requiring the written documentation in the form of a memorandum of understanding. So that's just a statement. You're going to have a process around that, and it's addressed in, I believe, page 3. But this is where we get in that trouble, because we state in those procedures that that can be done by anybody at any time, and not the body. So we want maybe clarifications in this statement that that's done by the body. For example, yes, sir?
Mr. Tinlin, where exactly on the document are you, just so I can follow?
Okay, we're on the first page, as I call it.
Okay.
We're in the background heading, and it says the evaluation process includes 4 components. So in a document, essentially, you're stating what your methodology is going to be. So I didn't have any issue with 3 of those, but we state about that memorandum of understanding. It's a document that's going to be used to adjust performance gaps by any member, because we go into very deep detail in a few pages I'll get to. So just think of that, because that's a tool we're saying we're going to use continuously to document gaps or outstanding performance by the members, not the body. So I had a question there from the legal counsel. Do we have to have a clarification?
Could you restate your point one more time?
Yep. So, number 3.
Number 3, okay.
The procedure for documenting outstanding performance in areas where improvement is needed by requiring written documentation in the form of the memorandum of understanding.
Okay.
So this is how we're stating how the process is going to be. The detail level is going to follow later in the document.
Correct.
And I think you made a point earlier about where it's coming from, but, the background states that it's,
Yep.
It's specific. These 4 employees, obviously.
Are going to follow this evaluation process. And then we just stated there's a standardized timeline for goal setting, ongoing feedback, and formal evaluations, which we have on the second page. There's a calendar for that. So the first one I had a concern about is on goal setting. It talks about all goals will be negotiated by the city council and employee at the beginning of the fiscal year, and you state that in your calendar, or in the new case of a new employee, within the first 15 days of employment. I feel that's a little tight. Normally, most corporations will have 30 days, 45 days. So I guess the discussion of that's where I have a question mark, is 15 days is aspirational, but can we really do that in 15 days?
What do you think industry standard is?
30 is what I've seen, and maybe from our stakeholders that have experience in this. Usually, you do an onboarding of any employee, and usually that's set in the first 30 days expectations.
So, and that is indeed private practice. I can attest to it. However, in a municipal setting.
Let's start with 30, and then when we vote on it, we vote on it.
Because I know in the government setting, sometimes it goes a little bit slower.
Correct. And I think because, it's impacted here, you can set any timeline, but it's impacted here on account of the fact that the body is meeting every other week. So that can affect these timelines.
Except we can have a special meeting with a new employee to fine-tune these goals. When you bring someone in, they know what the goals are, right? I think initial goals are the easiest to set. I think moving forward, when you've been an employee for years, sometimes it's harder to redefine goals than it is in the beginning. In the beginning, you bring someone on, you know what your goals are because you're trying to fill gaps from what's been done recently. They understand the immediate goals, because immediate goals, again, different than progressing goals often. So I think that's very easy to attain, and if we do 30 days, that's probably exceedingly easy to attain,
Okay.
right?
I'm good with it if consensus goes.
Okay, so in goal setting, the item 2, evaluation goals, we just talk about limited to 5 major areas. So when you state that, just more of a clarification or term, what major areas are you referring to? Is it the major areas that are referenced in your checklist? Or is it just 5 major areas at the consent of the body? Because I'm in the camp too, you can't have too many goals, right? Because you just set up for failure. So 3 to 5 is the norm in the private sector, major goals. So just maybe clarification of what do you mean by major area?
I would like to see no more than 5, so we can, really, if we only had 2 goals that were important to us, we can go 1 goal to 5 goals, but just say no more than 5.
It's limited to.
Yep. So just schematics, yep. And what is the definition? And I'm sometimes used to having a document that actually has definitions in the appendix. So what is a major area? What's our definition of major area? Is it just like infrastructure, budget, community relations, community service?
I think
All of those.
So now I'm just drawing those from the actual performance checklist, those major segments of
yeah,
evaluation.
I think they were in the major.
But that's a small one. That just had a small frowny face, not a big frowny face, So if we go to page 2, I had a question on the goals, as far as just, are they SMART? All goals have to be achievable, quantifiable, deadlines. So when we set these goals, is there a spot where they're retained at? Because sometimes you talk about record retention, so we have these goals being sent. So where do those goals reside?
They will ultimately reside, I believe, with the city clerk as the record keeper.
They'll be on the record of any meeting that we have.
Well, there has to be an actual file, so, right, there's going to
I
be, we're going to
think-
compile the file.
Mayor's
That's
correct.
fine.
The mayor's correct, because particularly when it comes to a closed session, right, they would have to stay with you. Particularly closed session,
Yeah.
because they're not, they're
Yeah,
not
they're
subject
not-
to FOIA, they're not,
Yeah, but goals wouldn't be discussed in a closed session. That doesn't make sense.
but their goals, think about it, their goals in terms of the evaluation of the employee, right?
Well, established goals, but future goals,
Same. They're all a part of the process of evaluating the employee. It couldn't be any other way.
And I
sounds like a
think,
transparency
But-
issue.
No, it doesn't.
You can keep a copy in the employee's file, but,
I mean, it's easy. I have the lock and key, that's fine. I'm just. this
because
is-
we do
Don't
need.
have to do anything
We
with
still
it.
need.
No, that's what I'm saying.
We still need a place to retain this stuff because we
Sure.
need to retain the council's goals, the city manager's goals, and then he can put his people's goals in it so we can see that we're all heading the same direction.
And I think August is talking, correct me if I'm wrong, I think August is talking about, the goals when we have a goal-setting, kind of event like the ones that we've had, and I'm parsing that out, I'm talking about goals established, the narrow goals of the performance evaluation, or like.
Yeah, the big list of this, like the list within 15 to 30 days, that's what I was thinking of. You wouldn't do that in a closed session.
As part of this review, it potentially could be part of a closed session. It's, of course, your call.
I think we're all on the same page, in August.
So we have secret goals.
No.
for
No,
people.
no secret goals.
Because they would be secret goals, because they're in closed session. To the rest of the world, they're secret goals.
No, because so that's just a portion of that event, right? Like,
Evaluation.
the goals, of course, will be known. They have to be known or they will
That's all
not
I'm
be
saying.
attained.
Yeah, there's a
right?
bigger.
So it's just part of the
separated.
document, part of what you're collecting,
Okay.
it's not part of what is
Worded that we
collected
put a
during that
copy
event.
of the person's goals in their file
Yeah.
and just leave it at that.
Sure, okay.
That works.
I
taking that
apologize
note.
for my devil's advocacy there.
No,
It's
but
just
if you
sounded
read
strange to
that
me.
whole statement, item 3, it also talks about objective strategies, deadlines, accomplishments, quarterly benchmarks, and status reports. For me, that's all objective evidence for the performance review support. So those are all records to me. So where would those all go?
Back with him. You're
Back
gonna be
with
the
you.
keeper.
They
So
can
you'd
all
be
go in
the-
the file. That's easy.
So all those statements would be records, and you'd maintain them?
That's
in a file.
part of the
File.
human resource. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I'm just getting a new colored folder.
Now, I'm always a stickler for detail.
Yeah,
You
I have
have, you
to-
have an activity, where it's going to go, who does it? So would we spell it out in this type of document? The city clerk shall.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think this is a matter of course, but yes,
Yeah.
you can spell it out.
But it should be spelled out so we don't, not 6 months from now, we tell the whole stuff.
So you never have to suffer through this again.
Yeah.
right?
Oh, sure.
So if we go now to performance evaluation checklist and memorandum of understanding, this was more just a note, that as I read it, you only use this tool twice a year, currently, mid-year and year-end. The rest are just goal reviews and adjustments to actions to make those goals happen. So my question to the body is, do we need to use that formal performance evaluation checklist mid-year? That's twice a year you're going to do it.
I think it's wise to use it as a tool. I don't think we have to recreate it, but maybe go back and look at it and
Yeah.
use it
Yeah.
as the benchmark starting point.
I like your idea of breaking it up a little bit.
I definitely think it
I
needs to
think
be
we can make the
broken up.
document much more user-friendly
Yes.
in a few ways. Okay. So then the memorandums of understanding will be submitted and discussed as needed by the council members, and this is what I caught and talked about on the first page. Doesn't say the body, the members. They'll share praise or concern along with any corresponding rebuttal or corroboration statements by the employee. There's an attachment. So this is your tool to documenting the good and the bad by members. But it doesn't say anything else. How do you roll that up? Because might have 5 individuals with different memorandums. So I was looking for clarification of that whole process.
Well, I would see the,
So this is referencing, I'm sorry, Mr. Councilmember Simpson, this is referencing, obviously, because it's incorporated under the performance evaluation checklist and memorandum of understanding, it's reflecting back to those, to those mid-year and final year evaluations.
Yep. This seems to be the tool where you're documenting in detail your great accomplishments or your opportunities for improvement.
Correct.
So just a thought again, but here's where we say council members and not
I
bodies.
think what you're saying is, some clarity within this particular section. Okay.
Section, okay. So just keep that in mind, because we'll get into the actual detail levels of that document use on the next page. So then the annual timelines, I just wanted to bring it to people's attention that, you have your June 30th completion of goal setting in your council approval process, so I'm assuming that's the body. Then you do your first quarterly review, and that's where I call, we're just identifying goals that are on track to be met and goals that may need extra attention. There's no checklist review, there's no performance. It doesn't really clarify. I guess we use that memorandum of understanding if we have to take action. That seems to be your tool you're using. So my question is, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 events for this calendar. Do we want to lighten that up?
I think we need to adjust it somewhat because budgets can often go through, they're supposed to be completed, right? But you're still a little bit wrapped up with budgets in June. Is that clear? True? Or do
We
you-
will be wrapped up the second meeting in May.
Okay, but if something didn't go well, all right, that's fine. I'll go with that
No,
answer.
by the charter, that's what.
Yeah, I know what the
supposed to be
charter
done.
says. I just know sometimes things have lingered
One
in the
time it
past.
lingered and
Okay, we're not going back.
contributes to a lot of the current situation.
Thank you. So I was trying to help you out here, but I want to ensure that the timeliness works with what has to transpire for business here. And apparently, Mr. Aker just said that this calendar will just work just fine.
I did not say anything of the such.
So you kind of double up activities if you see it, because in June 30th, you're going to get all the goals set. But at the same time, you're going to be doing the year-end summary review as a deadline for the people. And I see why they're hand in hand, because you're finishing up last year's performance and then setting new objectives. But normally, there's a little bit of overlap. You get the performance review done first, and then you give yourself some wiggle room and time to sit down with the goals. At least that's how I do it in private sector. I usually keep those separate. I do the year-end performance review as a separate activity, and then very closely, if the goals are set, you sit down with that employee and set the goals for the new fiscal year.
July 15th.
But isn't there some merit to attach the goals to the fiscal year?
Yes,
Yes. Well,
absolutely.
So that's what I'm attempting to do, but it seems like we'd be wrapping up one year and then, hey, setting the other. I think once we actually do this the first time, it's going to be painful the first time. It may be the second time in transition, but after that, it probably should be a little bit more well-oiled machine. As far as the timing is concerned, I'll defer to what the industry's best practice that you're advocating for, but it seems like that is a bit of a hiccup or a disconnect. How do we get them evaluated in a timely fashion and establish the new ones? Or maybe there's some overlap, like you're saying.
Kelly?
They 100% go together.
In corporate war, for me, it was the same week. Your boss told you how you did, and there's your new goals.
Well, it can be, I've seen it done, and we have done it in one and the same thing, right? So you do the year-end review, but at the same time, you are formulating your goals moving forward. That just eliminates another meeting and another conversation, because the conversations are the same. Like, one comes out of the other if things are working the way they're supposed to. So there's really no need to throw one more in there unless something tenuous happens and you decide that you need a little bit of breathing room and you want to further develop, but it's an active process anyways. All of this is an active process.
And by motion, we can move any date we need to move if that came up.
For what it's worth, in my company, you get an evaluation, and the goals for the next year are set about a month later. Because it may be the evaluation will spawn some discussion that will help set up the goal setting.
But in our unique situation,
Yeah.
if we're trying to link performance to the budget, we almost have to do it in reverse, where we're setting and then reviewing. So, I mean, which I'm okay with 100%. We got to try and get it right. And linking up the process, not so much to the time that we have right here, linking up to our budget process. And if that means, hey, if we're going to go ahead, chances are if things are really coming off the rails, if you're going to go into a budget, approve the budget, and then, hey, guess what, we're going to, we're going to set your goals, and then we're going to get rid of you or whoever it is that you're talking about. So, I mean, to me, it seems that it's important to link those two together, and if we have to do it in reverse, that makes sense to me, because we're just in a unique situation as far as a government entity.
So the other one, I think this is where we at least agree that we have to talk about the frequency, right? So the formal mid-year, annual, 5. I would recommend that we do a mid-year formal, and if there's a need for a touch point quarterly review, as a body, we can say this
needed.
as needed, right? So I live in the world of red, you react, a scorecard, green and red. Green means go. You don't have to go and do a lot of review on that. So we could build into this document that sort of statement that if we have a need for performance review, we as a body decide per the position.
And I'm okay with that. I'd like to see the date. On this date, we think about it, the body's got to talk about it that day. Do we need an evaluation, or do you jump to the next one?
Yeah, we can say whether we put that in a formal, adding it to an agenda in a meeting where we have it as an agenda, and I'm talking about we have a need
Maybe
for
2
some
times a
touch
year
points,
we
or
talk
we go
about
on.
2 times we say we don't need it or we do need it.
All right. And just the last one on this year-end summary review, and we'll get into the mechanics of that. How does that summary get accomplished? Just clarification, because we're going to have 5 different performance checklists with different ratings, right? Comments, and we talk a little bit about that in the next page, where negative comments that are going to stay in HR files will have to be voted by the body. But how do we consolidate all the different numbers? Because it just says we're going to have a year-end summary review. So how do we get 5 different individual reviews into one concise document?
How about a statement somewhere in there that says that whatever meeting to be right, we pick a recorder, and that person compiles it all.
And then do you just take, devil's in the details, do you take all those numbers and do weighted averages and accept the average of the 5? Or how do you do it?
So if I may, so think about the process for a second. Odds are, because we've had both closed sessions and then employees that have requested open sessions. In open sessions, it becomes simpler, obviously. Body votes, end of story. But in a closed session, then it becomes problematic. Because first, you're not selecting somebody to take notes. The clerk per charter is the keeper of the minutes, particularly so in a closed session. That's pursuant to statutory authority and case law above and beyond the city of Clawson. So that becomes a little bit of an issue, that process. So I think you've narrowed in on something that's a sort of sensitive topic given our area of municipal law. Navigating it is not necessarily simple, we can come up with a solution for it, because I'm thinking about the moment that after you come out of closed session, you come out, you have to vote, but all you're doing here is voting to adopt whatever occurred in there, which is covered by the fact that it was a closed session. So it is a trick bag. There's minutes that are kept, the minutes are kept by, or the information is kept by the clerk by law for a year, I presume beyond that, obviously realistically. But, but by law, at least a year. So you have a way to check back, and they're all going to be information in the employee file. But the process is a little nuanced.
Well, do we turn the job over for the scribe to be August?
Yeah, I mean, that goes without saying. That's the easy part. Yeah, that's the easy part. So I'm taking copious notes,
Yep,
and
okay.
I'm going to produce, we're going to produce a document that reflects this, and then hopefully we're going to match that intent.
and that's why I noticed that we talked about all these documents being generated by the individual council members, and all of a sudden it jumps to a summary. But we really don't
Yes.
clarify how that gets there.
So regardless of the statement, the original statement, law tells us this is a body.
Yep.
Right? On an individual basis, there's no action by the body when it comes to an individual statement. You can send in an individual something, but that's not a statement of the body. That has that carries with it no force of no. It doesn't carry with it the force, legislative force, the oversight force of this body. So, for I think clarification purposes, absolutely, we need to clarify that and indicate that. Once it's happening if it's happening in open session, everybody's speaking unilaterally, and you're taking a vote. Simple. At the end, and I know you're about to chime in, but at the end, closed session, a little different story.
Is that component a composite, even adding value, or even necessary? I mean, if you're being evaluated, you're hearing 5 different evaluations and making a composite out of it. It just seems to create another layer of,
Can I give you another thought, not to make it easier, to make it more complex, but something that you need to consider. Leave me for a moment aside in this mental exercise, but we're talking about 4 employees, and what we generate here, we have to be mindful of potential future liability. We're taking these actions where, all things being equal, you're going in a positive direction at all times, and you've hired this staff, and it's going to be with you to the end of days. However, given the realities of the world, it may be that we're utilizing these documents for a process that ultimately ends in termination. If that's the case, it can be easily foreseen that there may be litigation as a result. In such litigation, that's the world I inhabit in. Documentation can be curious. When we're talking about compiling things, we're adding a certain dimension. When we're talking about individual documents, we're adding a different dimension. And I think to Joe's point, we may have to consider following the process that you have with respect to those, as using just the correct terminology, using the scoring range and definition and ratings. However you design that, I think that makes a lot of sense, because it's traversing across employees, across the board, fair, impartial, so to speak. Once we start adding then now different components, we're going to play to a legal process that may not be so fortuitous for us as a city.
So it has to be compiled because we act as a body and not as individuals, so that it has to be compiled.
well, you're not necessarily, you're just creating an evaluation, you're not creating a vote.
Right.
You're providing your assessment, and it's to be taken by the employee who's being evaluated. And so I take everyone's feedback, and that's what it is. It's not it's an action of the body, and whether a closed or a public forum, to assess you. But to get a collective, I'm just not sure what adds to that other than greater confusion as far as the body is now saying, hey, you know what, you are 2.9 on a 6 scale, that's below the average, and so you're gone. I mean, to your point, it can be very well used against us.
The body could very well say you're a 5.9, and we're really happy to have you too. So, but the idea is that in everything we do, and I've heard it over and over again from both of you, rightfully so, we do not act independently, we act as a body. So the idea of a review is the culmination of the review. My personal slants really only have effect when they're compiled with the rest of the body, and that goes for everyone else here. So that's why it's
I
important.
guess for myself, I'm only pushing back on account of that you're creating sort of a false average that doesn't necessarily reflect the reality.
Well, of course it reflects the reality. If it's
No.
all of them thrown together, that is the reality. Because
No,
you
ma'am,
pull
because
one or
the
three or the
moment-
other ones apart, and you have the false reality.
Yeah, the moment that I'm describing, I guess, in legal terms is when, these glorious processes start, early on, without looking far away into trials, early on, there's a deposition notice that gets sent out to the entire body, right? And 99% of cases get settled there, because hypothetically speaking, what we see in scenarios in municipalities is never situations where all 5 members of a particular body, hypothetical body, in this example that I'm utilizing, all 5 members of this hypothetical body give solid 2s across the board or solid 4s across the board, right? What we do have is, in this hypothetical body, is a couple of members of council giving 0s and 1s, other members of council giving 9s and 10s. And then we're averaging to 5, and then the employee is gone.
I see.
But that's the average. So why, and you've been part of this process before, and I wasn't part of it, thankfully. The one time a tool was used and those type of things transpired, I was on my timeout at the time, and I'm very grateful to have been there. I just think you can't have a rule for one thing and then not have the same rule for something else. That's why we're always in trouble here. So if it's the body that makes a decision, like, it shouldn't matter, like, ultimately, it's not gonna matter, but it does matter for the purpose of saying 5 individuals equals 1 body equals 5 perspectives equals 1 combined perspective, and I think that's the only fair way.
I don't think I'm disagreeing with you, though. I'm not disagreeing you with respect to that portion of it. I'm disagreeing with you in creating when you're combining averages on a scoring sheet. I think the body is taking the action, the body is taking the vote, the body's doing everything, right? It's through your individual assessments. But what we're talking about is generating this additional document, right?
No, the additional
Instead
document would be all 5 of our comments
Right.
in writing. If we use the same form, nobody'd have to transcribe it. They could just put it, all 5 in a package and say, this is the comments of the 5. Then we can vote on it as a council and say, do we want to transmit this to the person as a body? These are our comments. And then it's up to us to fight over, Lou, you take that comment out or I'm not voting for this. And we can do that in closed session or open session.
Again, are you talking about, you're talking about merging all your commentary into one document, right? Is that what you're talking
Yeah,
about?
just so you can go through and say, these are my comments, these are mayor's comments, these were Councilman Tinlin's comments, and then we just vote on, this is what we're going to transmit to the candidate.
I think practically speaking, but, from a legal perspective, obviously, I would push back toward, on that for the reasons I just stated, but I think practically speaking, you may find it very difficult and onerous to do so.
But it wouldn't be onerous, because it'd just be cut and paste, it would be picking the whole document. If we use the same document, you just take whatever they typed in, put it in there, and you read through 5 different evaluations. Now we vote on,
Do this.
this is what we transmit.
Yeah, I think that process
Right?
is easy.
Yeah.
I think with that one, I agree wholeheartedly.
Thank you.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
anyway, we
but I
vote-
think Lou was talking about, Councilman.
He's talking about creating a separate document,
Correct.
but there's no need to create a
We don't- we
separate
don't-
document because we can take everyone's individual document, compile them, staple them, put them in a file.
That's precisely.
But we have to say, this is what the council is sending to them. So we vote on, this is what we're going to send them, so it's official. And then the rating, we have to vote on a rating. Was it a good year for them or a bad year? We can do that with,
But Councilmember Simpson, remember, when you're voting in here, the vote here will be rather cryptic, because that's all in closed session, for example.
maybe, and
But if it's open session, yes, I mean, fair game.
that's open season. But if it's in there, we just,
You
we
come here and you say, I
we
adopt
still as a
everything that's
council
not
have to
there.
come up,
Here too.
No,
we still as a council have to
sure.
make a decision, was that employee, did they have a good year or a bad year? we have to, as a council, say,
No, that's the, yeah, that's what I mean. You're going to end up having to be cryptic up here. Remember every motion you've ever filed after you come up for the closed session. That's the trick bag. That's why I guess I'm saying, in an open session, you're 100% correct. I mean, if it's, open meeting, 100% correct. Closed session, however, you're adopting wherever you're adopting there, and you're just coming up here saying we adopt whatever we agree to there because it's covered by the closed session, by the
Right.
performance evaluation.
yeah, and you come out, we talk in there and say, this is what we're going to adopt. We walk out here and vote on what we adopted.
Yes, okay.
That's what I'm saying.
Does the document have to have that clarification of special versus
In there.
open? Or that we know the rules for that?
No, that's law as a matter of course. I mean,
So if anything, just, we use summary a few times in this document.
Yeah.
So maybe just dropping that summary and just say final evaluation, and these documents will be present in the final package,
yeah.
right?
File
So that's,
that.
but we use summary a few times, so that's why I picked up on that.
If, I don't mean to be a dead horse, but are we cutting and pasting, or are you
No.
taking the actual documents, compiling them, and that is what is
I think the action
either
of the
received and
mayor
filed or
was
voted on?
Pile on, receive and file.
Yeah.
Amen.
And give it, transmit it all as one. Here.
Yeah, and they kind of define that, when I'm on page 3, it says recordation is item 3. And it talks about final summary evaluation, and it does list a fair amount of documents that were expected in the final packet. All right. So I want to go back up to the recordation. We talked about the performance evaluation checklist is maintained by the city manager. I didn't have an issue with that. But then it says the mayor will maintain a copy of completed city manager performance evaluation. It doesn't define the other direct reports in this requirement. And checklist in accordance with the record retention requirements, which I think I talked about earlier in the meeting. What is that?
So we've decided that if there's anything to compile, it will come to the mayor, and then those documents will then be forwarded on to the city clerk for appropriate storage.
So we maybe just could clarify that a little bit, saying it will then be sent to the city clerk. Okay.
You're done, give it to me.
Yep, okay. All right, and then we get to the number 2. This does have a little frowny face on it, memorandum of understanding, because you go through this process, and this is this ongoing documentation of successes, concerns, or failures by the council members, right? And it talks about the scope, the reasons why, the description. It gives an opportunity for the employee rebuttal. There is a comment in here that negative documentation must be voted on by council before becoming permanent part of the employee file. The employee can access the right. So my big question here was, is this memorandum of understanding from individual council members? That's the way I read it, or is it coming from the body? And if it is coming from the body, we should clarify the definition.
It starts with individuals.
Okay. And that's where I know we talked
Yeah.
earlier in the thing,
It
so I
starts
had
with an-
questions
it's-
about that.
Where we hoped it sounded. It starts with an individual, but if it's going to go in their permanent record, the body's got to vote on it.
May I ask, what is the definition of negative documentation? Is a low rating on the scale? So what is,
Separate documents altogether. It's like you're sending a hand slap letter for something that transpired, is what I'm guessing.
Oh, okay.
Right?
So it's-
It's like a separate item beyond the evaluation.
additional information beyond the normal evaluation?
It's one higher than an email. Hey, this is official. You got 14 days to tell me what you're going to tell me. And then we'll go on from there. Then if it's, and if that person wants to go farther, they got to come to council and get it voted on to put it in his file.
Except, does an individual member of the body have the authority to state to any of our employees that you have 14 days to do anything on your own?
Just answer the thing. You don't have to do anything. You just have to give you a reason.
I think that's sketchy.
I
at
don't
best.
know, because now they're
think that's
taking
not correct.
direction from individuals instead of the body.
Yeah, I would have a concern with that as well, Councilmember Sampson. And I think it's the process that we talked about earlier prior to the break of the potential for, because of the various communications that are, that can occur as part of this, separate and distinct from the item that we're just addressing. Because of the communications, there could be a problem. We're attempting to modify that to say that you would bring it to the body. I think, as we're doing that, because we're bringing, any concerns that individual members have to the body to vote in open public, I think we should have that whole process be public. It is in the sense that, and the way that you do that, because any of the employees would have the right to a closed session, you'd say, maybe as part of that touch point quarterly that we talked about, that's when you have the, you say, this is the time that we talk about as, we have an item on the agenda, we have to have that touch point, I believe we should have a quarterly review, with employee X, with Rennis. And then, I say, happy to do so, respectfully request a closed session, have your opinion, set it up, enter the closed session in the next meeting, or at the, well, it wouldn't necessarily be that meeting. I think that as a process perhaps is better set up for than navigating some of the issues that this would pose, both from OMA standpoint, but also this ability to, that can be construed as one member directing staff. Even though I understand what you're saying, that you're saying, all I'm asking you is not to take action, I'm asking you to give you an explanation, but that kind of micromanagement, unfortunately, may get us into trouble.
This was written quite a while ago,
Yes, sir.
so nobody here.
It hasn't been abused. I could agree, but.
Me and you are probably the only two that were here. What it really is, it's one step higher than an email that can get blown off for 6 weeks. And when you say, hey, what about that? Oh, I didn't get it. I didn't have enough time to look at it yet. I'm working on it. This is a formal thing saying, hey, I got a question. Now he's got 14 days to answer it.
I would say that if there is an item that requires that type of attention, it's something the entire body should be aware of,
Well, that's-
and the entire body should.
That's why
act.
this is written to say, if I was to write it, I'd send it to all you.
Yeah, but that's what we talked about before the break. That's the problem, because now we're having, decision-making kind of emails, right? And that's where the OMA is
No,
triggered, and that's
it's
the problem.
informational emails because I'm telling them guys, this is what I said.
I know it's coming from a good place. I hate to fight you, but I must.
Well, tell us how to do it right.
Yeah.
So can we, because this is a vehicle, I consider just a calibration, right? You got something that you've got a gap, you got to identify it, you want to change it as a body. Can we modify this words?
Yes.
To have the body issue this type of document or
but,
some type
you know-
of vehicle for calibration?
Right, but it would be, and that's why my suggestion was to do it as a vote of the body requesting that, like if it's that quarterly touch point or whatever, or if somebody says, the body could always amend the agenda, right? Just as you commonly do. You say, I would like to address, I make a motion to have a touch point evaluation or evaluation of the employee. I think that's how you would do it. Otherwise, communication, right, is, then you get into agreement territory. That's a problem.
And then the option to go into closed session kicks in, right?
Yes. Because, the employee has always the option.
Then help Mr. Tinlin write that part up.
Yeah, I think I think, more so than clarity, I'm going to take, I believe it was a frowny face, and I'm
Yes.
going to bring it back.
Right there.
We're going
You got two frowny faces
Thank
actually
you.
on this one.
Thank you.
But still, when you write it up, still keep a 14-day response in it.
Yeah, so I worked together on that. Because I see what the intent of that section was. It's just,
Yeah,
one, make it right, and how we can make it, where we can use it when we need to,
Yeah.
adhere to it. Okay. And then we've already talked, we kind of jumped ahead. We're just this final summary evaluation, we just dropped that summary and just have that list of documents will be part of the evaluation. That's the question I had there. Amazingly enough, we're at the end of the mechanics or the methods that you had done. Now we have the tools where you have the performance evaluation checklist. And I know we had talked about maybe simplifying that down to 5 versus 6. Do we want to go this far? Did I wear you out yet, or?
No, keep going.
So that was the comments I've heard, simplify this document and make it just a 5. Because I know a lot of private sector, we have a 5 factor now. It's usually high, top, high, solid, partial, and then the low bottom one. All right. All right. And it kind of follows what, Lou, your thing is that most studies have shown they got only 1%, they have to almost walk on water, right, to become the highest level, which is unusual. So the breakdown is fairly normal, what I've seen in private sector before. So it sounds like we could move it to 5.
Yeah. I'm just here really, we just need a process to evaluate people.
Yeah.
How we turn out.
And then the duties to apply scoring, this is where, I've already captured, we want to break this out with bullets of assessment. But as you read it, some are applicable to probably some positions, but it's more geared to city manager. These are my notes here. So for example, if we had our financial officer, community relations probably would not be a segment we'd be evaluating that role on, right?
No,
Every single employee
Yeah, no.
talks to the citizens.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that should be on everybody's. Every single employee worries about the financials, so that should be on there.
The questions would be different.
Yeah, different,
Of course,
yeah.
they would be applicable to what their services are.
So this is a tool, maybe, I'm not sure,
With you.
we can have some expertise, because I think it's just wordsmithing here. And it's not like it's going to take 10 months to do this, it's just a wordsmithing exercise. All right?
You be done tomorrow morning or next day?
If I have an edible file, I'm very fast at typing, so. And then just achievements, add additional comments. And where we say concerns, the more modern terminology is opportunities for improvements, areas for needed improvement, stuff like that. So that was my only comment there.
I have no problems with that.
Yeah, just taking the concerns. Because really, I agree with Paul, performance reviews are for success of the employee, right? Sometimes we have gaps, we have to talk about that, that's always the tough part. But really, the tool should be designed to keeping our employees focused on where we need to be at. And if we have some deviation, we can talk in an open forum. So improving this tool and then actually executing it will make, I think, a lot better relationship. Because if you have a tool and you're consistent and it's fair, normally these are not difficult to do with anybody.
Yeah, I'm just curious, I guess the document we currently have was generated by some PhDs out of Bowling Green. Doesn't like the Michigan Municipal League have these kinds of forms available?
There's tons.
There, and the City Managers Association, the Clerks Association, the Treasurers Association,
And every-
they're out there.
And every corporation that is around here has
Yeah.
a plan.
Right, so,
For different sized cities, for different, it's all,
Sure.
there's all out there.
I guess, I don't know. It's almost like there's so many choices to look to, I guess, at this point. We're just saying, we will forge our own way and be done with
Yeah,
it.
simple, if we just can get these areas of concern, simplify it, and get some detailed levels in, I think this is a doable document, and maybe change some of the milestone points that we review upon need during those quarters, but have the hard review at the end in the mid-year review. And if we can digitalize these tools, that'd be wonderful, actually getting documents that can be edited or having drop down. I'm not sure how our sophistication of level is for digitalization of these documents, but I know, Lou, yours was typed in, right? I'm assuming you have a PDF
That's why I
editor?
said
Yeah.
I'll send you a Word document.
Yep.
Because I turned it to a Word document.
So the additional item we need to do would be to establish another form that we can utilize for key stakeholders, which would be other employees. We can make it available to the public. I just think it would be really great to have a full circle
Yep.
opportunity to hear back from all the stakeholders. So that would involve probably maybe placing something on the website, with an opportunity to respond back and then send the information to, we'd have to have somewhere that the documents would be sent back to someone, the documents would be sent back to, so August would probably get that job
Are
too.
you going to request names
Pardon me?
or anonymous? Anonymous comments, or you're going to request names?
I think they should have to have names. I think that's only
So
respectful,
so you
because
want
that
to do
goes
like
on
a
both
Facebook
ways.
poll where you can send to your friends, everyone write in and say X about this person and share it around all social media until you can get someone fired?
Not a big fan of the Facebook.
That's kind of what you're
Facebook
asking for a public,
statistics of-
a
or,
public online
No,
forum. That's
weren't
what's
you
going to
talking about
happen.
feedback of what we're planning to do for the process tool?
No, I'm talking
360.
about
We
feedback
do the
for-
360.
Well, yeah, 360s are normally key stakeholders, I guess who you define. They're usually anonymous, right? At least it's from the employee standpoint. Yeah, the employee, if you're going to give a 360 feedback to your direct reporting manager, normally those
This
are
isn't corporate
anonymous.
America, though. That's the
Yeah,
thing.
corporate
This is
America.
not
So we
corporate
can't have
America.
that. Then, that's going to be fraught with,
Can't have anonymous, but key
opportunities.
stakeholders make sense,
Yeah. Just how do you manage it in the government setting?
So would it make sense of that whoever's being evaluated have their choices, and then we would have ours, and then have a blend of that?
I think so.
What does that mean?
Well, so I'll give you the example from I think is going to be a learning curve for the five of you when it comes to the attorney. This tool is not necessarily well designed for lawyers. And I presume, given that none of the five of you are attorneys, you wouldn't necessarily have any, you wouldn't have the necessary experience to be able to, come up with a design with the necessary tool for it. But I'll give you some ideas. You're going to have your own. Obviously, from your perspective, you see, either myself or somebody else from my office here every other week. The work that we do is broader than that by definition. And I think that's probably true, not probably, I know it's true of all four positions. I think that information from is going to be critical, even to your tools and vice versa, obviously.
Do we hire you or we hire your firm?
We hire my firm, sir.
Then really it's just a contract review every year
Is our contract with you, or is our contract with your firm?
Contract is with the firm.
with the firm. So we just really review you and tell you what we like about your firm and we don't.
Well, and the point that I made earlier with respect to the exchange that the mayor and I had at our at my one and only review was exactly that. And I think the broader question that the mayor asked at the time was something like, okay, so what do you see, something to the tune of like, what do you do, or what do you see yourself as doing, an opening question to get me to talk, and I thought it critically important. I thought it critically important at the time, and I still do, because because it is more than just these two meetings, and it is more than just myself. And what I told the mayor, the body, obviously everybody that was at the closed session at the time was, well, we do business on a contract, right? I am the face of it, but for every session, everything that I do for the city, any given week, we have 10 attorneys, at least 4 or 5 of them are engaged in doing various things for the city. You're reviewing me, but I'm the face of the corporation.
Right. I think Councilman Tinlin should just do the 3, and then for him, do a contract review every year.
I
Or twice a year.
I don't think we need to know every scope of what you do, but I think there are deliverables that every employee has to an organization, and I think we can aptly measure if those deliverables are being met. I think that's our responsibility. I don't need to know, I don't really care if your admin creates a document in a time frame that works for you. I just know that if we ask for something here, that we want it. I know if someone sits in that seat on your behalf, I would hope they'd come prepared and be able to address questions. And you know what I mean? Like, there are certain things that are just like absolutes that we can 100% evaluate.
I couldn't agree more.
But there are other things that I wouldn't get in the minutia of, which is why when we talk about reviews of people like August or the treasurer that are currently under our purview, it's essential that we have the city manager and other people weigh in on those evaluations, because we are not part of the day-to-day here, nor should we be. Therefore, they have a different view. But again, deliverables, image, impression, accessibility, willingness, integrity, equity, things like that, we can judge based on what we see on our every 2 weeks and then our encounters in between. But that's not the full entity of a person's tasks. And therefore, we're not equipped to answer that directly, which is why I would want the opportunity for these employees to have the people who work with them every day have the opportunity to say, hey, he works really hard. I really appreciate that he does this, or he could really use skills, or he pays attention to them, but he ignores me. Like, those are things you build off of. So that's why I would
That
want
makes
those in
sense.
call.
It is a little interesting, however, when it comes to actual case law that we have in the area. For example, to give the very example they utilize, Madam Mayor, where we get into issues, and that's why this is both a cumbersome but yet very interesting, at least for me as an attorney, but a cumbersome process for the body is, let's say we're reviewing our hypothetical clerk, August, and you say it's important for the city manager to be there. Well, theoretically, yes, it is. Case law says that depends on August as to whether August, because we have case law that says if August were to feel slighted, threatened, encumbered, or any way negatively fraught by the presence of a third party, such as a city manager, he shouldn't have the city manager present.
But the same goes, so Mr. Raker or any city manager may say, I welcome a employee review by council member so-and-so and so-and-so.
No, ma'am,
But
it's not
oh
the
my
law.
gosh, don't let that other person or that other person take part in my
No, no, no.
evaluation.
What I'm telling you is actual case law.
I
When
heard what you said.
You're extrapolating, the logical follow-up from it, and I don't question your logic in the matter, but the law is not logical.
I don't question your
Right.
case law either, but I wasn't arguing your case law. I was just saying, in this factor, it would be helpful too, but I get that it's his determination, just like it would be his determination whether he had an open or a closed session, right? There are a lot of little things that you can go à la carte on some things, right? And some things are absolutes and some things are not. And if you pick your egg roll, you got to decide if you want your sweet and sour on top of it, or if you want sweet and sour mustard, or if you want nothing, right? Like, so there's just choices, that's all.
So, can we all agree that we'll do this evaluation package for our three, and then work on a special evaluation system for a contractor? Then we can, whatever works for his can work for other contractors, and we can give it to the,
Well, Councilmember, if I may, and without speaking for my contract, I wouldn't want to do that, speak for my contract. The contract is there, for so long as it's there, obviously the body can move to breach that contract, but odds are you would probably not want to do that. But regardless, I don't want to talk about that. But, that statement now, extrapolating from that statement, we may have issues, going above and beyond this contract. This contract and this review makes sense because this position sits here, and it's one of the positions mentioned in the charter. Referencing back the conversation that we had in my last review during that closed session, what I told you is that the charter speaks a certain way about the city attorney. It doesn't have a whole lot. The charter of the Code of Ordinances is very muted, and for some obvious and some non-obvious reasons, because of the nature of the work that attorneys do for a municipality. But at the end of the day, what the position has been, since long before I got here, has been a contract position. The charter reflects an employee, right? That's a problem. There's a disconnect there. There's some dissonance there that's problematic. But now, you can review me, and you can review anybody that sits in this position, and that makes sense, and I think that ought to continue. There's feedback that is natural, important, and should go on. But we cannot expand it to other contractors. We're never going to get any contractors.
no, it would-
But that's not true, though. Contractors are reviewed as a part of the process, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be formalized. That's based on deliverables as well. That's based on providing what you say you're going to in your contract, right? And professional service contracts are the same as a material contract in that way. You provide what you state you will provide in the beginning, your timing, your price, all those little things that go together, provided they are working appropriately, as you stated. That's like an ongoing review, right? So the minute people fall out of line and stop delivering the words they're supposed to deliver, then that kind of brings forth like a need for intervention, at whatever level that might be.
Right. I guess the only thing that I'm pointing out is that the need for intervention, which I agree with you, is we don't intervene this way. We intervene by breaking contracts,
Right.
by letting up.
Yeah.
I'm just talking about this particular process, which is specific to the fourth positions.
I would say in this, when we do this, let's do a separate page. At least identify the dates we want to, we want to sit down with them in June, and we want to sit down with them in December, or pick 2 dates when you're doing it, whatever fits into the thing, and say, the attorney will be, the contract attorney will be reviewed on this date and this date, and then we can go into a room and just have at it. Tell them how great he is, or tell them how bad he is, but have 2 dates that we get to do that. So we are always reviewing people. And for him, we can send him emails all the time.
Most of us don't, I don't think.
But I think that'd be a cleaner way to do this, is just pick a timeline for him of when he's going to be reviewed, or to remind us to review him. So, okay, what were you going to say?
Say, I'm looking at the other council. I can add a statement in there, then you guys can decide in the calendar portion for city attorney review. Okay.
That makes sense.
Well, I went through the document and the tools, so. Other items?
You want me to
We
convert it
went
all?
through the document and tools.
Oh, no,
We-
well, my assignment, everyone contributed, I appreciate that.
Teasing.
So, I edit real fast, so do we want to, what do I do with the document? So I'll re-edit this to the comments, I'll put in what I've heard. So where does that document go? Lou, you said you're gonna give me an editable file, so I can do my, Or
We
just go
can't-
him.
Yeah, we can. I
Yeah.
think maybe, since, I think the document should go to the city manager. He'll allocate the duty, then I presume, to himself, his staff, myself, the clerk, as need be.
Okay.
I think, but the communication should go that way.
Can I provide the notes I had on all the items that they did?
That'd be great. We also have the recording that we'll stick the earbud in and watch it
Absolutely.
again.
Everything
We'll
is
get it.
subject to FOIA,
Yeah.
available to the public, the whole nine yards.
Why can't he send us a copy tomorrow or a week from now? I don't want to keep saying tomorrow, he'd have pressure. But as soon as he's done, send it to all of us and say, get any comments, send them to me.
It's for review.
Individually.
It's not for,
Send it to the city
Not,
manager.
not broadcast. He sends it out one-on-one. Here's my thing, hey, I don't like this.
Well, here's the, I guess, the potential issue is a step removed.
Is the what?
Is a step removed. So there's no potential, there's no issue right away.
No.
But what we do want, what we do want is to avoid that potential issue. If a member of council sends to all members of council a document that he's worked on, and the council is going to vote on eventually to make it, make changes, modifications, alterations, additions, deletions, whatever it may be, that can be construed as the beginning of the conversation, the beginning of the decision-making. And that's the problem. It's not immediate, I'll grant you that. But we don't, it's not I guess my philosophy, for what it's worth, for representing the city of Clawson is we shouldn't be the test case for anything. We're too small. We don't, and that's too close to my liking.
Let's shorten it. What should we do?
Direct to city manager will allocate, will bring back to you, add it to the agenda. You will consider it at the next agenda,
But
or
Mr.
whatever appropriate.
Mr. Tinlin's edits from this exercise will be part of what he sends us.
Correct.
We will
Yeah.
then add to it from the notes and any observations from the recordings.
Absolutely.
And then we will send it to you. We'll
wanna
have a
see what he does.
deliberation about it, and then when it's ready to go, after your
Submit
legal
back to
review,
council
we'll
on
put
the
it back
agenda.
on the agenda.
Which will make it editable or adjustable by you.
Then everybody identify which changes are which.
Yes.
Because I'm going to get a document with three people's changes.
Yes.
We're making this for us.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're producing a document, well, that becomes, I presume, practically difficult, Councilmember Sampson, but I think a document that comes back to you, I think we're all gonna be able to, between Mr. Tinlin, myself, clerk, city manager, Nick, own up to whatever, this was my thought or whatever it is. But to be able to track it in the way you do, I think that's going to make it a little too cumbersome. And again, this is a document that's produced onto the agenda.
Not with Word.
But it's not coming to you in Word, though, it's coming to you as part of the agenda. It's
Well,
like-
in Word, you can put it all different. One of you can underline, one of you can italicize. You can delineate all your changes. You guys pick one, send us the document, and then when we're all done, then we take all we turn it back into a Word and take all the annotations out. But
I don't know.
Word is not my expertise, I'll stay out of it. It's not a legal issue, so I'll leave the rest of them.
I understand my output, so I'll take the document, do the edits based on all our comments.
Yeah, okay, I'll give it to you tonight.
And
or tomorrow
send it to the city manager, and then he'll delegate resources, right? Are we thirsty for more? Do we
Nope.
want to have any more?
I'm done with the document.
Yeah, I'm done with the document. I have clear. So expectations are I move fast, so by Friday morning, you expect the document coming to the city manager's office. I know you're closed on Friday, so it'll be light reading over the weekend.
And we're going to get it that day?
You're not going to get it until there's a legal review, and then it gets up on the agenda.
So I'm going to try to get it as rapidly as possible. It's only a 4 to 5 page document. It's, I'll probably have it sooner than later to you, but then they'll at least start the process quickly so you can go through that evaluation and get it back to us.
Thank you.
so we're looking at least 2 weeks.
Looking at probably the second meeting in March.
2 weeks. Okay, we'll go back to the agenda then. That takes care of this performance evaluation tool for now. There was no line item for council comments.
Motion to adjourn. Motion's on the floor. Supported.
Roll call.
Mayor Milan,
Yep.
Councilmember Sampson, Councilmember Shepherd,
Yes.
Councilmember Tinlin, Mr.
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
What if I said no?
Yeah. Don't you
Well,
dare.
since we're all here, I wish we could get those dates set for the budget, but I guess we can do that quickly somewhere else.
It's a agenda item
Agenda item, okay.
for the next meeting.
All right. Eventually, my enthusiasm will wear down.
Eventually it will too.
I'm pretty enthusiastic, though. I've been doing it for quite a while. Or you wear it down, one or two.
I've been sitting up here since 20.